Okay, it's 6:30, and I will call the regular meeting of the Comfort Lake Forest Lake Watershed District to attention here. And the first item is our setting of the meeting agenda. And there are a few changes I was handed here just a few minutes ago. Under new business, we will be moving F under old business, the Moody Lake Project Phase 2, to coincide with the Moody Lake, or the CWF grant agreement, which includes that project. And because of time issues, a prior commitment from our EOR representative, we will be moving items, I hope I get this right, tell me if I don't, H and I up to under C, under new business. And F, excuse me. Oh, that's correct, yeah. So F, H, and I will move under Blue Water Science contract and 2017 reports. We'll just call that CA for now. Any other changes, Mike?
Are we bringing 7F up as well? Did you say that?
Yes, 7 up. 7 up. 7F will be moved up.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I'm aware of.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion we approve the agenda as revised.
I'll second.
Okay, I think Steve had that one. So with that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. I'm just going to make one comment as the chair tonight. We have a full agenda, as you can see, and we're usually pretty casual with Robert's Rules of Order, but we're going to be a little stricter tonight so that we can get through all of this. And so please, when you have a comment to make or a question, ask for permission so that we don't have side conversations going on, and we'll move through this, I think, rather quickly. So the first item is the consent agenda. We have 4 board meeting minutes to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Public open forum. Anyone present who is not on the agenda and wishes to address the board may do so at this time. I'll ask one more time. This is your chance to have an open opportunity to talk to the board. Okay, we will move then to item number 5, Citizens Advisory Committee update.
Madam President, managers, I don't have a CAC update this month. The March CAC meeting was canceled because Jerry Gruntner was on vacation, and we heard from several members that they wouldn't have been able to make it, so we canceled the March CAC meeting.
Very good, thank you. Moving on to the AIS management plan under new business. Mike?
Madam President, managers, I have prepared for you tonight our 2018 AIS management plan, and that plan is based on the 2018 approved budget as well as input from our consultants. And I went into a fair amount of detail in the actual plan itself, both with the budget and kind of a written narrative of what's going on at each of the lakes. So I did prepare a presentation, but it's quite brief. And if you have any other questions, you can refer to this or ask me.
Okay.
So just in terms of a budget summary for our AIS program in 2018, we are estimating that the total program will cost $180,808. $113,808 of that money is coming from our levy. We estimate that $392 will be unspent, so we're really kind of trying to maximize the funds we have available. $67,000 is coming from grants and other contributions from all of our partners in our AIS activities. This can be compared to $214,968 that were spent in the program last year. And the $34,000 difference between last year and this year is primarily from the removal of Eurasian water milfoil herbicide treatments from our 2018 budget. And we've also received lower watercraft inspection program contributions from our partners for 2018. So I'm going to go through very briefly each of our lakes and kind of what the most noteworthy things that are occurring on that lake are. First, Moody Lake, we're going to continue to operate our aerator in 2018. It's currently running, and that picture on the bottom is what it looks like from the parking lot on the west side of Moody Lake. That will continue running until all of the ice on the lake has melted, at which point I'll turn off the system and canoe around the lake to collect all of the floating signs. As far as curly-leaf pondweed management on Moody Lake goes, we do not have any funding for treatment in our 2018 budget, and we have not conducted herbicide treatments of curly-leaf in Moody Lake in previous years because the lake is designated as a natural environment lake, which limits our ability to use herbicides. But we're going to restart that conversation with the DNR because we want to see, kind of in coordination with our alum treatment, if we should be targeting that curly leaf to really get that internal phosphorus release under control. Bone Lake, curly leaf pondweed management. We have funding for Steve McComas, Blue Water Science, to conduct delineation and assessment surveys of the curly leaf in Bone Lake, and funding for approximately 2 acres of treatment. For Eurasian water milfoil, we have funding for Steve McComas' time to conduct 2 surveys, delineation and assessment. We do not have any treatment of Eurasian water milfoil budgeted in 2018 for any of our lakes, including Bone Lake. The fish barriers will continue to be operated. They're completely open right now, so that when the ice and snow melt in the spring, it won't obstruct the flow in and out of the lake. But as the water starts to warm up and carp start getting close to their spawning period, I'm going to start actively managing those barriers so we don't get carp moving in and out of Bone Lake. For rough fish management, the DNR has planned a standard fisheries survey, so they're going to be doing a full survey of Bone Lake this year. And they kind of want to see what's going on, especially with walleye in that lake, because they do stock walleye in Bone Lake. So I'm going to try to get those results as soon as I can, so we can take a look at that. I'm going to continue to work with a volunteer who uses a zebra mussel sampling plate in Bone Lake. We have not detected zebra mussels in Bone Lake to date. And we have increased funding for our watercraft inspection program in Bone Lake this year. We have a goal of 450 hours relative to 315 that were performed last year. That's because we had contributions from the Bone Lake Association this year for the first time ever, and we got a $1,000 grant from Washington County to put towards Bone Lake as well. Little Comfort Lake, staff are going to continue to monitor curly leaf pondweed growth in Little Comfort Lake. It's been very light and not kind of warranting herbicide treatment in the past, and I'm just going to make sure that's the same case this year. So I'll go out and do a full survey of curly leaf and Little Comfort, and I'm going to continue to sample for zebra mussels in Little Comfort Lake using a plate. Little Comfort Lake is currently listed as invaded with zebra mussels because of its connectivity with Comfort Lake, but I haven't heard of any reports of zebra mussels in Little Comfort. Have any of you folks in the audience? Okay. Shields Lake, as you know, we're going through a fish barrier retrofit project. The project ordering for that is going to occur at the April 19th regular meeting, and the construction will likely occur in late summer or fall of this year. I actually just got a phone call from the Forest Lake Lowdown about 2 hours ago, and they want to write a story about this project, so they're asking for more information about that. We're going to continue to sample for zebra mussels in Shields Lake. We do have funding in our budget to perform a rough fish survey in Shields Lake for this year, and we want to get an idea of what the carp population looks like in there and potentially do a carp harvest before we complete our alum treatment in Shields Lake. Curly leaf pondweed, we do not have any treatment funded for 2018. I'm going to talk to the DNR and do a little research about how curly leaf pondweed management should happen either before or after alum treatments and how that affects alum treatments before we do the alum treatment. In Lake Keewatin, formerly known as Sylvan Lake, I'm going to go out and do an AIS early detection survey this year in June or early July to make sure we don't see any new invasive species in Lake Keewatin. I'm going to continue to monitor the purple loosestrife population, and if it looks like we need to supplement the biocontrol insects that we've been releasing out there the last few years, we can collect some and kind of supplement the population out there. And we're going to continue to sample for zebra mussels there as well. In Forest Lake, we have funding for Steve McComas to do delineation and assessment surveys for both curly leaf pondweed and Eurasian water milfoil. We only have funding for curly leaf pondweed treatment, and we have funding to approximately treat about 110 acres of curly leaf pondweed this year. We're going to continue our flowering rush program similarly to how it's been conducted in the past. It's been pretty successful. We've knocked down the population considerably since 2014. And the only change is that this year we're going to do our herbicide treatments in the June to July timeframe rather than the August to September timeframe. And that's kind of based on all the research that's been done at Pelican River Watershed District in Detroit Lakes. They found that that June to July timeframe is really ideal for doing the herbicide treatments. We are going to continue to sample for zebra mussels around Forest Lake this year, even though they've spread all throughout first, second, and third lakes, just to get an idea of how their populations change post-invasion. As far as the watercraft inspection program goes, we have a goal of 2,250 hours this year. That is actually down from 2,752 hours in 2017, and we had a slight reduction from a couple of our partners in our program for Forest Lake, so that's why we have a slightly reduced goal this year. Those watercraft inspections are still going to be really focused on weekends and holidays to really get the most of our funding. For Comfort Lake, we have funding for blue water science surveys for both pre and post curly leaf pondweed and Eurasian water milfoil treatment. We have funding for approximately 4 acres of curly leaf pondweed treatment. We do not have any treatment budgeted for Eurasian water milfoil. We'll continue to sample for zebra mussels with 2 plates in Comfort Lake this year. And for the watercraft inspection program, again, we have a slight reduction from 660 hours worth of inspections to a goal of 575 for this year. And that again is from just a slight reduction in the funding that we got from our partners of that program. Like I said before, the watercraft inspection program is going to be run really similarly to how it was run last year. We were really pleased at the number of inspections we were able to get last year. We had a slight reduction in funding from last year in the program. It's still going to be running from just prior to fishing opener until about mid-October. And like I said, we're still going to try to prioritize the high traffic times of the year for those inspections. Any questions for me?
Good report, thanks.
Thank you.
Are you going to follow up with the reports on AIS management? No, okay.
And
I
yeah,
think- I
that
think it would
Steve
be-
McComas prepared? So you're asking?
No, these are the 2018 AIS management plan documents from March 15th that are part of our packet.
Oh, yep.
And then I think for the audience's benefit, if you could just recap why there's no budget for AIS, Eurasian milfoil management in the budget.
Yeah, the reason why we decided not to budget Eurasian water milfoil management for 2018 for all of our lakes is that there's a limitation in the management techniques that we have. And people have tried to really extensively manage milfoil in lakes where it's initially invaded. White Bear Lake and Lower Pryor Lake are 2 that Steve McComas kind of kept an eye on. After its initial infestation, those lakes were treated really heavily with herbicides and the plants still continued to spread around the lake. And just due to the limitation of techniques that we have, and the fact that curly leaf pondweed is more intimately related to water quality in that it dies back in early summer and releases phosphorus into the water column that makes algae grow. Eurasian water milfoil grows later in the year and doesn't do that same type of thing. So Eurasian water milfoil isn't as connected to water quality as curly leaf pondweed is. And the board, not to speak on your behalf, but I think there was discussion about using the district's limited funding toward water quality improvement activities rather than milfoil management. Does Steve McComas or Mike Kinney or anyone else have anything to add to that?
Just briefly, Madam President, managers, one of the other observations that I know Steve McComas would certainly speak to is that in some of the lakes, and Prior Lake is a good one, that while there was an initial heavy infestation and initial heavy treatment attempts, ultimately which then ceased, at some point there's this correlation between, or at least what we do know of Eurasian water milfoil, correlation between that plant and the nitrogen in the sediment or nitrogen in the water or a source. And so in many of the water bodies that we're seeing around the metro area, when they get this heavy infestation, they use up the nitrogen, and then the plants die back substantially, to the point that even if some of the districts in these other areas had been in the practice of treating, they wouldn't have, just because it ultimately just resulted in a light growth. So while no guarantee on any lake, there's always a few exceptions around, particularly in the metro where so many lakes are infested with EWM. That is another possibility, but it also leads into another topic that we're going to get into here shortly. So.
Okay, Mike, proceed.
Okay, I think that's all that I had for that agenda item. I just kind of summarized the AIS update that we had.
Thank you.
Yep.
The next item then to discuss with the AIS management plan are the two memos, taking another look at the Eurasian water milfoil and what we could do against our comprehensive plan. These two memos address that topic. So are you going to speak to that, or is Administrator Kennedy?
I can start.
Okay, very good.
Madam President, managers, so agenda item 6B is that we have some potential additions to the AIS program for the board to consider tonight. Staff met with Steve McComas on February 7th, and then again with Manager Anderson and Manager Schmaltz on February 12th, and we discussed Steve's reports from last year and kind of how we can improve those going forward, and also talked about a couple of potential additions to the AIS program for this year. And I wasn't planning on presenting on all of those, but I can just give you a very brief summary. Basically, we identified as a group 8 optional add-ons to the AIS program this year, and I have those summarized in a table that you can view on the screen. Like I mentioned earlier, we're currently forecasting that we'll have an unspent budget of $392 in our AIS program as a whole. So if we wanted to add any of these other add-ons into our program, it might require us to use our district reserve funds. But what you see here are 8 different items. I described them in the memo, and I can go through them very briefly if you'd like me to. But I have the cost, not including staff time, to add any of these items in, and then I also have a staff time estimate for how much of my time I expect to be used for each of those items. Would you like me to summarize each of those, or do you want me to go to what our recommendation is for you?
I think you can summarize very briefly on each point and then give your recommendation.
Sure.
Very, very succinctly.
So the first point is a Comfort Lake curly-leaf pondweed hand-pulling pilot project. And this idea is basically that curly-leaf pondweed, for those of you who live on Comfort Lake, know that it's very sparse in Comfort Lake. Usually it's found at 1, 2, 3, 4 sites only of the maybe 60 that Steve samples each year. And we don't really know why that is, but part of the cause of that might be that the lake organized a kind of large-scale hand-pulling effort some years ago, maybe 5 years ago or so.
It's probably 10.
10 years ago. And the idea here is that we'd kind of like to take another shot at that effort, and Steve McComas would come and spend a couple of his hours leading a volunteer effort where we could tap into Lake Association volunteers, anyone else who is able to help, and go out after Steve has done his curly-leaf pondweed delineation and physically hand pull basically all of the curly-leaf pondweed that Steve can find in the lake, which is usually not very much. And we can pilot that this year and see what happens. If we hand pull all of that, does it grow back later in the year? Does it grow back at all next year? If it does grow back next year, hopefully it would be an even smaller amount and that we could stay on top of that. And I think we could really keep that population in check by doing that hand pulling event. That would cost $440 of Steve McComas's time, 10 hours of my time, and as you recall, we currently have funding in our budget for curly-leaf pondweed management in Comfort Lake, and if we wanted to fund this, we could use that herbicide money to fund this activity. Activity number 2 is a Eurasian water question?
Manager Schmaltz.
Should we discuss each one so we can
move through it then? I mean, since the information is fresh, we can discuss it and make a decision. Or do you want to do it?
I think we should let him get
Okay.
through the whole report, and then we can come back and do that.
Sure, and then I'll tell you my our recommendation. Number 2 is a Eurasian water milfoil nitrogen project. And the thing that Mike Kinney was talking about earlier is there's this idea that Eurasian water milfoil is likely limited by nitrogen a lot of the time in lakes that it's growing in. So if more nitrogen gets into the lake, that'll make more milfoil grow, and vice versa. And Steve McComas has done a number of projects where he's gone out and actually measured the amount of nitrogen in plant tissue and measured the amount of nitrogen in the sediments that the plant's growing in, and looked at areas of high density milfoil growth and areas of low density milfoil growth, and kind of try to understand the extent to which nitrogen availability is limiting the growth pattern of that plant. And this is a really cutting edge idea to try to kind of manage the nitrogen that's making the plants grow rather than just putting herbicides on the plants. So we would look at piloting this project in Comfort Lake and collecting a number of plant samples, sediment samples, and water samples with Steve McComas' time to try to understand what's making Eurasian water milfoil grow in some areas of Comfort Lake and not other areas, and what we can do about that, and hopefully what we can do to predict its growth in future years and maybe even decrease its growth. Do you have anything to add to that, Steve?
That's a good summary.
Okay, great. Okay, so that would be $3,000 of Steve McComas' time, and that $3,000 also includes all of the lab work for sending the samples in, and Steve would lead that effort. I would contribute 20 hours of my time to help him with the field work and help him write up a report if necessary. The third item is a third flowering rush delineation in Forest Lake. As you know, we do 2 herbicide treatments of flowering rush that are approximately a month apart from each other. And usually what we do is we conduct a delineation before the first one and after the second one, with nothing in between. And we usually treat flowering rush in the August and September timeframe. So Steve can go out in August before the first treatment and the flowering rush is growing up above the water, and he can look at where it's at and do a delineation that way. And like I said, we're shifting our treatment time frame to June, July this year rather than August, September. And what that means is that in June, when we do our first treatment, the plant won't have grown up above the water yet. So it's going to be hard for Steve to delineate, and we're going to pretty much rely on last year's treatment areas because it does grow back for the most part in the same areas. And what this would do is Steve would go out before the first treatment and take a look at the native plants, the beneficial plants in our treatment areas, and then he would come out, if we decide to fund this, between the 2 treatments, take a look at the results of that first treatment, and then get an idea of where the second treatment needs to be, or if it should be in the same location, because by that time the flowering rush might be above the water. So this would be adding that third delineation, and that would be $900 of Steve McComas' time, 0 hours of my time. Anything you'd like to add to that, Steve?
The second delineations in between will give us also an idea of the impacts, if there are any, to the native plants. So not only will we see what happens to the flowering rush, but also to the native plants. That's a fairly big concern with the DNR and for us as well. So that's where that extra delineation and assessment would help.
And I forgot to mention that we're typically treating 40 acres of flowering rush 2 times. So these are fairly substantial areas that we're treating, and there's value in knowing how that's affecting the native plants in those areas. The 4th and 5th items are both point intercept surveys where Steve basically sets up a grid across Bone Lake and Forest Lake, and he samples the plants at every spot on that grid to get an idea of both the native and invasive plants that are growing in that lake. Our capital improvement plan in our watershed management plan has those listed out once every 5 years. And these lakes were both surveyed in 2013, so we would be due for a new point intercept survey this year. We have not budgeted for that activity. Forest Lake would cost $3,000 of Steve McComas' time, and Bone Lake would cost $2,700. The last 3 are all if the board wanted to consider adding Eurasian water milfoil treatment in for any of those 3 lakes. that's the cost. It would cost $600 per acre for Forest Lake, using the methods that we've used in the past for Forest Lake, and $221 per acre for both Comfort Lake and Bone Lake. So with that, do you have any questions before I move into staff's recommendation?
I think for the value of the audience, if you could just highlight the number of acres that are typically, or have been typically treated
Yeah.
on those 3 lakes.
Yep, I think I got that right here. So Forest Lake, we treated in 2015, 30.3 acres, 2016, 13.9 acres, and 2017, 33.3 acres of milfoil. For Comfort Lake, in 2015, 16, and 17, we treated 0.5, 7.5, and 3.2 acres respectively. And in Bone Lake, in 2015, 16, and 17, we treated 3.4, 0.7, and 0 acres respectively. And the areas that we treat here are based on what Steve McComas delineates as heavy nuisance level growth, and then also what the DNR allows us to treat. So Comfort Lake last year was an example where I think Steve McComas delineated about 6 acres, but the DNR granted us a permit to treat 3.2.
And 2016 also was the early treatment that we tried.
Correct.
Correct, okay.
Yep. Any other questions?
Yes.
Andrew Schmaltz.
Just to confirm on scenario number 1 with the flowering rush treatment. So we're going to delineate earlier in the year so we won't know where the flowering rush is.
Correct.
But then we're not going to have a second delineation. We're going to just have a final assessment like we normally do in September or something like that.
Yep, that's what's currently funded.
So I think there might be a risk there because we don't know where we're treating the first time by just going through the historical maps. We won't know if we've missed some new areas, and therefore we won't know that to treat the second time since there won't be a delineation. So my concern is that we may lose ground in the overall percentage of treatment and compromise our chance to get a grant the following year. So we've been done better each year, so that was my concern on that one. So with an extra $400 or $900, it might be, we either spend the extra $900 so we know where we have to treat the second time, or we should delineate so we can see the first time like we historically have done, is my thought.
Yeah, that's a good point because we
sorry.
do find new patches, usually a few each year. So that is something that we would miss if we're just relying
Right.
on last year's. Yep.
And that would adversely affect on the year-end report because our percentage of knockdown would go backwards probably.
Has our experience been that we might also treat areas that didn't need treatment because we're doing it without a
Correct.
good visibility?
Well, this is the first year that we're doing that early
Right.
season treatment. And we typically, do you know how many actual acres of flowering rush we have, Steve?
Probably less than 2.
Less than 2 acres of actual flowering rush, and we're treating 40-acre
Okay.
polygons. And the idea there is we're doing swaths of the shoreline so that we can really increase the concentration exposure time of the chemical on those plants and really knock them down. Because if we were just trying to point treat wherever it's growing, the chemical would likely wash away and it wouldn't be effective.
So you're over treating anyway, so
Yeah.
chance of missing or wasting is already there.
So if you would actually stick to the normal protocol, and when you do your assessment, not only assess where the flowering rush is, but also assess the increased growth on the native plants, you can still see what the knockdown on the native plants would be, which would give you the information you're really looking for without jeopardizing the continuity of the program. So that's a suggestion. But.
Madam President, managers, I think Mike could also speak a little bit to the rationale of pursuing this option is also based on the success of Detroit Lakes and their work with University of Mississippi, I believe it is.
Yeah.
So there's a reason why we are recommending this earlier treatment because they have demonstrated in that particular area great success with this treatment method. So clearly the thing that the DNR, as Steve McComas pointed out, is that they're very concerned about the native plant population. So that first assessment would accomplish that. There'd be some plants up, but not the normal amount that we would probably see if we waited till July. But it would, the more important thing for the DNR in terms of the permitting side is making sure that we know what native plants are in what areas and that we avoid the treatment of those.
That would mirror in a lot of ways the success of the 2016 early treatment of Eurasian milfoil and comfort, I believe.
Just two other
Manager
comments.
Schmaltz.
One is that 40 acres is less than 1% of the total acreage of the lake. So while 40 acres is a lot of area compared to the 2,600 acres, it's really, and we're also in an eradication mode, so we have to live with the issues that we have in the short term. So that would be one comment I have. And then secondly, if we are going to do an early treatment, early assessment, then I would recommend strongly that if stuff grows outside the previously treated areas, that we note what that is and how much it is, so we can kind of have an asterisk saying this is an exception because we never really treated those areas. That would be the other thought.
And Steve does specifically track the new patches versus what was there the previous year, so we'll have a record of that. Yep.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, so for the staff recommendation, we recommend that we.
I have one other question.
Manager Schmaltz.
I was under the impression that point intercept studies are required every 5 years by the DNR in order to get the permits we need for harvesting and for herbicide treatment. So if we don't have a 5-year update, we may be limited on our permits and activities. So I'm looking for some input on whether that's true from my historical memory or whether that's not true.
No, that's correct. If we wanted to get any type of variance above and beyond existing rules, a point intercept survey is required.
Right. So there's a little bit of a risk in not doing that, but maybe we won't need a variance for the first year. I don't know.
Mike, you have something to say?
We evaluated some of those.
Just
Madam
to clarify, to keep this moving, just if you want to speak, ask for the chair's attention. All right, go ahead.
Madam President, managers, so you may recall that we looked at some of these things at lake management plans a few years ago and really saw no value in pursuing those because we didn't see any likelihood of asking for these variances.
Excuse me?
Manager Schmaltz.
I think that was a vegetation management plan, wasn't it? Not a
Correct.
point intercept plan? They're different.
Well, that's correct, but the point intercept is needed if we wanted a variance, and we didn't see likelihood of needing a variance was very, very small.
Okay.
Okay, so for our staff recommendation, we recommend that we fund 2 of the 8 activities I listed. The first, the curly leaf pondweed hand pulling pilot project. We do have $1,300 in our budget currently for curly leaf pondweed herbicide treatments, and I'm going to suggest, staff is suggesting that we transfer that money over to fund the hand pulling pilot project. And we do have more than $440 to do that, and if it requires a second day, we could bring Steve McComas in for a second day to do that with the leftover money if that's needed. So that's our first recommendation. Our second is that staff recommends we proceed with item number 2, the Eurasian water milfoil nitrogen project on Comfort Lake. From what we can tell, this is really the cutting edge of Eurasian water milfoil management research, and this might allow us to kind of get at the root of the problem by addressing the nitrogen coming into the lake rather than going the herbicide treatment route that would maybe be just a seasonal relief from the milfoil. We also suggest that we do not approve program add-ons 3 through 8 at this time due to limited availability of funds in the 2018 budget. So we suggest that number 2 be funded with reserve funds that the district has.
I'll make a motion to approve items 1 and 2. 1 for $440 and 2 for $3,000. I think the knowledge we gained from number 2 probably could be used or applied throughout the Watershed district.
Thank you.
And then I'll make a motion to not approve items 3 through 8.
Is there a second? I will ask another time, is there a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Administrator Kenny, you had your hand up?
Well, only that an additional option from the funding side on the nitrogen project is that we have not yet pursued an option for asking for grant funds, but given its nature, we have some just very recent research paper that's been out that aligns with some of this, which Steve McComas could speak to, but we think that there's some possibilities for pursuing this piece of it, so.
Manager Schmaltz?
Well, John had his hand up first.
Okay, I saw yours first.
I kind of jumped in, but I guess I don't have a problem with approving 1 and 2, but I think we should talk about adding number 3 on as well. That was my concern with seconding that first motion, is I don't think we went far enough. I mean, we're going to go blind on just treating and not knowing what happened, and then we're going to try to figure out if we don't normally do that. We normally try to use data to make our decisions. So for the extra $900, it seems like item number 3 is well worth the funds. I like item 2 because it's got the research and we're going to learn something from it. And item 1, we've seen the benefit of doing item 1 on Comfort Lake, so there seems to be benefit in doing it again. I know I've tried the same thing with milfoil and it didn't work very well. So anyway, that was what I was thinking.
Manager Schmaltz?
Okay, just additional clarification. I support number 1 with the caveat that it might be more helpful to have some chemical treatment in a small area to compare the 2 techniques. I know that Comfort Lake has a problem with curly being mixed in with the lily pads, so therefore a pulling strategy probably makes a lot of sense there, but it might be interesting to see how effective it is versus treating a smaller area somewhere else. Otherwise, I still support the program either way.
Yeah, we can wait and see when Steve McComas performs his delineation just how much of it is out there. We might not even have enough in the lake to set up treatments like that.
And then number 2, I think it's a very interesting project, and we have a history of supporting some research projects, but I think this is a very complicated program that you're recommending here. I don't think $3,000 is going to get us very far. It could probably be spent better elsewhere. My suggestion would be that if it's such a good idea, we should find a university that's specializing in milfoil research and develop a co-op program with them where we match maybe 50-50. We can increase our budget and effort, and we also get the expertise of a university in research design and everything else. So I think it's an interesting idea. It may provide some benefit, but for us to go alone, we're not a research organization. We do that sometimes on some programs, but I think in this case it'd be better off to try to find a partner, which we're very good at doing. We've done this in a lot of other programs. If we can't find a partner, then the question is about validity of the idea.
And just to clarify, Steve McComas has done this exact type of project in other lakes before, so this would be a chance to do it in Comfort Lake and see how the results of Comfort Lake compared to his previous studies and kind of what he already knows about nitrogen and milfoil. So he knows exactly, I mean, not to speak on your behalf, but I think Steve McComas knows the methods that are needed for this type of project. Yep.
Administrator Kenny?
Madam President, managers, on the sampling side, there's also just simply the additional benefit of gaining more monitoring data in locations that we probably previously would not have looked. But from my background in the certified crop advisor piece, with the way that nitrogen responds in the environment, it would suggest in some of these locations, and Bone Lake I think is another good example, where we're seeing really targeted areas where this growth continues past many years of its infestation, that it's a likely source someplace. So, so it's not totally new from the scientific side point, but also from a little bit of, there's a benefit both of additional monitoring data that we would collect from these different locations, but then also would establish a proof of concept then that we could use to do an application for a larger grant.
I would just like to add that our comprehensive plan does address invasive species, and it does encourage the district to do pilot programs and research to stay on the cutting edge of research in this area, to add to the scientific research in this area. And it seems to me that, given the fact that most Eurasian milfoil, from my conversations with the DNR, they don't go far enough because people run out of money and they stop after about year 3 or 4 because they can't control it. And so to me, this seems like a perfect opportunity to take that directive in our comprehensive plan and start a pilot project. And that's what this is. And for $3,000, we can garner support after we learn some things with this initial $3,000 investment. Getting the University of Minnesota and the extensive research that they're doing, your contacts, Mr. McComas, and in this field, and getting other groups involved. Mike, you and I were at a conference here about a month ago, and there were 3 or 4 scientists from the University of Minnesota talking about the various research projects that they're doing. So this would be ideal to corral, as you mentioned, Manager Schmaltz. But you got to start somewhere, and our comprehensive plan guides us to this recommendation that staff is presenting tonight. So I'm going to make a recommendation, or excuse me, a motion, that we follow the staff recommendation and implement item 1 and 2, and that we delay decisions on 3 through 8 until the May meeting. That gives us time to consider the flowering rush information, which is rather extensive, and then also to talk with our folks in the other lakes and see about their issues or concerns with not treating Eurasian milfoil. The cost for the other lakes, other than forest, is really small. It's under $1,000. And so we're not talking about a lot of money there. And I think that one of the statements that was made in the document here is that we're looking to eradicate Eurasian milfoil. The immediate objective is to control it. And if we can eradicate, great, but that's not really the goal. The goal is to contain it. And so not treating may not be a good idea. I'm not sure. But my motion, again, to be concise, is that we follow staff recommendation, implement items 1 and 2, and delay or table items 3 through 8, and reconsider those at the May meeting.
Okay.
The May meeting?
Discussion, do we have another
The May
discussion?
meeting.
Do you have a second?
I need a second.
Okay, I will second.
Okay? Now, time for discussion.
Okay, part of the reason that I mean, 3 through 8, I didn't think that that was a huge amount of money. Part of the reason I didn't put that on there was because, well, number 1, staff didn't recommend it, but my thoughts are, if we treat the flowering rush, whatever's out there, Mike goes around at least past years and cuts all the viable seed heads, cuts the seed heads that he can cut, so he really limits the amount that it's gonna spread in a year by, if there is flowering rush and it does come up, a lot of those heads are gonna be cut. So in my mind, it wasn't gonna, 1 year wasn't gonna make it spread that much anyway. That's my thought, but you guys are the experts, so.
Well, that item can be brought up again at the May meeting if this motion passes. So is there any further discussion
So
on
May
the motion?
instead of April?
Well, it says May.
Yeah,
They're
if I could
revisiting
add something to that real
yes.
quick. The nice thing about the May meeting is the curlyleaf pondweed treatment in Forest Lake will have occurred by that time likely. So that might free up more money within our AIS budget if we don't treat 110 acres, if we treat less than that.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
thanks.
Manager Schmaltz?
Yes, I think that both option 1 and option 2 are important, and I think that because they're important, I would ask the chair to withdraw their motion and vote on each one separately rather than trying to do a blanket program. Let each program stand on its own merit. Otherwise, you take the risk of losing both.
My motion stands as it is.
Okay.
I'm following staff recommendation.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just want to ensure that we have it done.
Identify yourself, please.
Oh, Wally Osley, and I live on Comfort Lake. There's a lot of research that has been done on Eurasian milfoil on a national states and communities. And I would like to ensure, or have insurance, that we have done the written research as much as the, in service kinds of research. For example, the University of Vermont has done quite a bit of work in the study of the bottom of lakes and condition of that bottom compared to the performance of irrigation milfoil. And so I think we should make sure we are doing something that's already been done to a large degree.
I think that's why we have one of the top experts on board here in Mr. McComas, and perhaps you can address that direct question.
Sure, Madam Chair and Board. Yes, in fact, we have done extensive literature research, and we are at the point now we need to go to the next step, and this is the next step. And there is some information that just came out here this last week from the University of Minnesota that recommended that we look at watershed management and good water quality management in terms of its potential impacts to mitigate and to manage these invasive species. So we are right on the cutting edge of that whole field.
Steve, can you just address for the audience again the difference in nitrogen uptake between an invasive species and a natural native plant?
Sure, Madam Chair. It seems like these invasive species, milfoil, Eurasian milfoil is a good example, is a high nitrogen user, which means it needs high nitrogen content, high nitrogen levels to really excel and grow to these nuisance conditions. The native milfoil is a low nitrogen user, as are a lot of our pond weeds. So they can grow under low nitrogen conditions do just fine. In fact, Eurasian milfoil will grow too under low nitrogen, but will not produce that heavy growth. So if we find areas that are high nitrogen, whether it's incoming water or whether it's from the sediments, those often are correlated with the heavy growth of milfoil, and that would be an area then to work with nitrogen management, which is brand new cutting edge, and that needs to be kind of documented and evaluated a little bit further.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion from the board? Yes.
Madam Chair, might I suggest also that the motion include approval of a fund transfer of the $3,000 from the reserve fund to the appropriate AIS fund?
Yeah, I can make that if needed, because we're saving some money on the curly leaf pondweed budget, so there may be excess funds there. So it may not be 3,000, it may be 2,000. But I will add the authorization to transfer funds from the reserve fund as needed, not to exceed $3,000.
I'll second.
Okay. So we have an amended motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion from the board? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. All right. We will move on to the Blue Water Science contract and 2017 reports.
Madam President, managers, this is the last of our AIS topics for the night, and I have two things to present to you today. Both of these were presented to you on January 25th and not accepted at that time. The first is that we have updated drafts of the 2017 reports from Blue Water Science. Manager Schmaltz, Manager Anderson met with staff and Steve McComas in February and kind of gave some suggestions for Steve McComas on how we can improve the drafts of the reports, both for 2017 and going forward. And he's made many of those changes in the new drafts that you have. So first I would look for you to accept those reports. And then the second thing that I have for you is our draft contract with Blue Water Science for 2018. And if you turn to the back page of that, you can see a quote for all of Steve McComas's activities. The first batch, the $19,500, are activities that were in our approved 2018 budget and we already have planned. You can see that he has additional line items that we can add or choose not to add at our will, and there's the nitrogen monitoring project, that's $3,000, and the $440 for curly leaf pondweed hand pulling, And then you see last, he actually has an hourly rate of $110 per hour for any other services that we choose to add later in the year. An example of that is last year when we found zebra mussels in Comfort Lake, and Steve kind of mobilized the volunteers to search for them in Comfort Lake.
Okay, let's start with the 2017 reports. Is there a motion to accept the reports?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any comments, questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now let's talk about the contract and the approval of the contract. Is there a motion to accept the contract?
I'll make a motion to accept the contract, including the additional costs for nitrogen monitoring and hand pulling of CLP for Comfort Lake.
Thank you.
For a total of additional $3,440.
I'll second. Any further comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to CA, our new CA is going to be the combination of 6F and 7F, and let's start with that.
Madam President, just if I may also just remind members of the audience that came in, I saw some come in after the meeting started. We do have a sign-in sheet. If you could please be sure to sign in if you happen to leave after one of these topics. So, thank you. Dr. Funke, do you want to? Okay. Yes. The 2018 Clean Water Fund grant agreement for the Moody Lake Alum project. Alum treatment project. Board, you may remember that the district had applied for and received a grant for $135,000 for Moody Lake, and we have completed the work plan, submitted it. It has been approved, and now the district needs to also approve the grant agreement with Bowser themselves to fully execute the agreement.
Okay, this is an administrative action, so is there a motion to accept?
I'll make the motion that we accept resolution 18-03-01 as presented.
I'll second.
The motion's been made and seconded. This is a roll call vote. Jackie Anderson, aye. Jackie McNamara is absent. Wayne Moe.
Aye.
Stephen Schmaltz.
Aye.
John Spence.
Aye.
As president, I declare the resolution adopted by the majority, a unanimous vote of the majority present. Thank you.
All right, Madam President and managers, a second item actually within that same agenda item is an update on the Moody Wetland Rehabilitation Project. End of last year, I presented some initial monitoring in 2017 that we collected from the outlet of wetland A and B. But just to, I wanted to take one step back and remind you this was an adaptive management approach. So we proposed a multi-phased process to the grant application. So the first phase was the excavation of wetland A and B of that phosphorus-rich sediment layer that had accumulated. We wanted to do effectiveness monitoring, then follow up if needed with a spot alum treatment in those wetland A and B. Oh, I'm sorry, are you guys looking for, you're just looking for the memo? Okay.
Go ahead.
So
So spot alum treatment in the remaining sediment in those wetland A and B that we thought we may not be able to excavate. Do another round of effectiveness monitoring and continue to the next downstream wetland C to see if there's additional work. So we completed phase one, the excavation of wetland A and B. The monitoring results I presented to the board end of last year showed that we achieved a significant portion of our original project goal, and that was 0.2 milligrams per liter out of the outlet of wetland C. The monitoring data also showed that we still continue to see, as we did in the original monitoring, treatment of wetland C of water quality. So as in the original bid documents for excavation work, we only proposed excavation of wetland A and B and not within wetland C. So for phase 2, which would be completed in 2018, this merely is just an update for the board. We have already approved the entire grant or ordered the entire project in June of 2016. But to give you an update, at the end of last year, we also collected sediment core samples from wetland A and B in those basins that have the specific phosphorus fractions needed to make an alum dose. So we found that, as we saw in our original monitoring, that high rates of releasable phosphorus are really concentrated in the eastern side of wetland A and wetland B. So we kind of went through some series of options, put it out to some contractors for bid, and have received quotes back. So the low quote for those spot treatments is $20,000 in wetland A and B. There's some additional funds, so then we moved into investigating what additional work we may be able to do in wetland C. We always recognize there are other benefits that we could do to enhance the treatment function and just the general ecology of wetland C. So we have proposed putting an aggregating structure at the immediate outlet of wetland C at the Peterson driveway. And then we also, as part of this grant, went a little beyond our original project boundary to the Peterson, what we've termed the Peterson Pond, directly downstream of that Peterson driveway. And we took sediment cores. There was some higher phosphorus, but the resident has expressed interest in cleaning out that pond on their own. It was something they were planning to do. It is in conjunction with this project. It was a very shallow layer of accumulated sediment with high phosphorus. So they are in agreement to excavate that pond, and then as part of the grant, then we would also put in a stabilization outlet at the end of that pond. So essentially we are stabilizing the water levels, increasing that treatment capacity. There used to be a remnant of a ditch through that wetland. And then with the combination of the alum treatment and the improvements to wetland C, through effectiveness monitoring, we would hope to see that concentration at the outlet of wetland C drop from 0.26 down to our goal of 0.2. We're very close. Are there any questions on phase 2?
Well, it's just a comment, really. I mean, the difference is between the goal of 445 and our achievement already of 376.
Correct.
So 69 pounds of phosphorus or 70 pounds of phosphorus additional. And the $20,000 is going to be the expense of that, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and I know that there's a length, a time component to the calculation, but what does that give us in a pounds per phosphorus value over time? Well, you know, if it's only 70 pounds, we're adding to the reduction that we got now.
I would add, one component of this is part of a larger Clean Water Fund grant, and so we stated our goal was 0.2 with the different phases. So our effectiveness monitoring showed that we didn't achieve it, so adding on the additional cost to achieve the remaining reduction.
It's still part of the grant.
We have a contractual obligation to achieve that.
Okay, and this
but
is still...
it's interesting to look at that in terms of step by step. So when we pitched the project, it was the whole everything, and so the cost per pound was quite low, but the excavation and alum treatment have a higher.
The $20,000 is still part of the grant that we have available to us, correct?
Yep,
All right.
this is still within the existing grant.
Very good.
Correct, yep.
And so that's not really an action item tonight, it's more of an information item?
For the update for phase 2,
all right.
correct.
All right, so,
Madam President,
yes.
if I could just jump in. So as I think you alluded to, so it's, 60 or 70 pounds, but that's per year. So if you assume at least a 20-year life expectancy, you're looking at, say, 1,200 pounds. So if you divide that into 20,000, I mean, you're really cheap still.
Yeah.
Cheap pounds, dollars per pound.
Madam President?
Yes,
Actually,
Manager
the total
Schmaltz.
cost is $20,000 in engineering also to do the wetland treatment, right? You got $20,000 in engineering cost also, or is that included with the original $20,000?
That's a good question. So the fourth page of that memo, and this is where I apologize, I put everything together. The first 3 pages is the update on the original Clean Water Fund grant for the wetland rehabilitation work. The The last page is proposed engineering services for the second Clean Water Fund grant that was just approved by the board or adopted. So that's for the in-lake alum treatment of
Yeah,
Moody
okay.
Lake, and it's a separate project.
So, okay.
Separate project. okay.
Correct. And I apologize for putting those together.
Sure.
So your
So,
statement was
Madam-
correct then?
Okay.
Madam President?
Yes,
So-
Engineer
so-
Gradsky.
So yes, my statement is correct, but you're also correct that there is some engineering costs associated with that, but that's part of the original budget.
It's still a good number though.
Right, correct.
Okay. So this is actually the phase 2 is the alum treatment, correct? All right.
No, Madam President, the phase 2 is, so we're going to be doing the agri-drain and the other
Okay.
work there.
Yeah,
So
here it
of
is.
the Moody Lake wetland project. And so the Moody Lake alum treatment is the in-lake portion. You will know that the agencies, so through, while they do not permit alum treatment, their still recommendation is to address the external load. And the completion of the alum treatment, in addition to the external practices that we've completed through our precision diagnostic monitoring efforts, will get us into the low 40. I mean, we calculate roughly $42 a pound of reduction costs.
It wasn't a justification question. It was basically just to make sure that we're handling this appropriately tonight. So both of these together are phase 2. One's in-lake treatment. No?
Actually, so to clarify, and I'll just walk through the wetland, the in-wetland, so there's a small scale alum treatment, probably done with a backpack from shore or some small structure, and the aggregate structure at Wetland C. That is phase 2 of the Moody Wetland Rehabilitation Grant.
Okay.
The in-lake alum treatment is a separate project for the Moody Lake in-lake alum treatment. And so we wrote the grant last year anticipating we would complete the Moody Wetland Rehabilitation Project this year, address the watershed load, and meet the requirements of the state agencies and our own need to have assurance that it will be effective. And then we can then rather quickly do the in-lake alum treatment in Moody Lake as been planned by the board for many years, but as a separate project.
Okay. All right. So we don't have to take action on first pages 1, 2, and 3 of this document.
Correct.
But on the last page, page 4, we do. Correct?
Correct.
All right. Do you want to address any of this? I mean, I think we're all pretty familiar with the alum treatment for Moody Lake. So there's no recommended motion, but would a board member please offer one?
I'll move that we continue with this program as budgeted at $19,668.
I'll second.
Okay. And just for clarification for the minutes, this is the Moody Lake alum treatment proposed engineering services. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. And now we will move on to H, 2018 Effectiveness Monitoring Scope of Work under new business.
Right. Madam President and managers, presented before you is a proposed scope of work for 2018 effectiveness monitoring. This was part of the 2018 budgeting process in the program level to essentially complete monitoring for projects that have been completed that didn't already have monitoring worked into the budget. So the 3 projects within the district that wouldn't be monitored this year are the Bixby Park Water Quality Improvement Project, the Third Lake Pond Wetland Treatment Basin, and then the Hilo Lane Stormwater Retrofit Project. And so I have slides to help illustrate these locations. So on the map that's on the screen, we have our Bixby Park project in the upper left. There's the Third Lake Pond in the far right on the east basin of Forest Lake, and then Hilo Lane Stormwater Retrofit Project on the southern shore of the middle basin of Forest Lake. And so there's just a summary within the memo, and I'll leave it up to the board how much you want me to add detail or maybe just clarify, of work that was completed in 2017 within these projects. So it's just a summary to help kind of refresh your memory of things that have been done. So we did monitor Bixby Park in 2017 preliminarily. And then one aspect is just the actual loads coming out of it, but also working with University of St. Thomas to start looking at the wetland water levels. I do want to clarify at the bottom of the first page, I said that no piezometers were installed in 2017, and I actually just spoke with a professor we were coordinating for this year for monitoring, and they have all the piezometers installed. It was just that they didn't have the sensors within the piezometers. So these are just these tubes with holes in the bottom that fill with water, and you can monitor the wetland water levels. So I've spoken with them, and that is being planned for this year in conjunction with a second year of flow and water quality monitoring by EOR at some of the same locations. There are 3 locations where we know from last year we can install level loggers to measure continuous flow, and then we'll also collect grab samples at 2 additional sites to support our findings from 2017. So really the second year of monitoring is to get another year of data when the site's even more fully established to help understand how the water moves through that project and our reduction effectiveness. In Third Lake Pond, that site, the water discharging from that Third Lake Pond wetland was monitored as part of the 2016 Forest Lake Diagnostic. We took a couple grab samples last year of just concentration to see where we were at during the rehabilitation phase for vegetation, but that was not fully established yet. So this year we propose, with the vegetation being established, having a full year of monitoring of continuous flow and water quality grab samples to get at an annual load to compare to the 2016 data and before, see how we meet project goals. In the Highland Lane Stormwater Retrofit Project, this is a different type of system. There aren't as defined inlets and outlets as some of these other projects to measure continuous flow and water quality. So what we propose is just going within the iron enhanced sand filter outlet structure to collect some water quality gram samples. What's most important in these systems is really to see what concentration we're seeing being discharged from that iron enhanced sand filter. Even if we can't get a strong estimate of everything coming directly into that filter basin, to have a sense of what is our treated concentration being discharged from that project. And then while we're out there, we'll see how water levels decrease following a rainfall event to make sure that we have everything kind of adjusted properly in that outlet structure, check on the vegetation, just make sure there's no sediment and debris buildup. So in task 2 then essentially is the analysis of all this data, and I just wanted to point out there's really only 4 sites that are going to be gauged for flow and have a load estimate completed at the end of the year. That's 3 in Bixby and 1 at the Third Lake Pond outlet. So similar to what we've done in the past, then as part of this proposed scope, we would summarize the data in a short technical memo, present to the board, and kind of give recommendations for any future monitoring that might be needed and record what our observations are about performance. So the total number of hours is 132. There's mileage, lab, and logger expenses. So the total cost for the 2018 effectiveness monitoring was $20,000, $469. And the timeline April through November. But I just wanted to note that the total budget for effectiveness monitoring was $30,000. So with some of that additional money, we have this alternative task that we put into this scope. It's not effectiveness monitoring, but we wanted to, at the request of some comments we hear from the board during discussions, present to you opportunities for additional assessment to prepare for future work as it may be needed so that we stay on schedule, especially with the board pursuing loan options to start building more projects. There's this Himes Lake drainage area. It's not Himes Lake itself, but a ditch. So Himes Lake drains south. Actually, I'm not following. Yeah, here it is. So out of Himes Lake, I just have a map here. Himes Lake is in the upper left. It's covered in green just in this photo, in that aerial photo. But the outlet of Himes Lake, now Himes Lake has good water quality. We did a diagnostic several years back, 40 parts per billion, very good quality shallow lake. But the outlet crosses west over Interstate 35, goes south, crosses east again, and in a lateral ditch east towards essentially that tax forfeit project that we submitted a Clean Water Fund grant for last year. We have some previous monitoring data that shows, compared to some of the other sites along the Sunrise River, so what this figure shows is that total phosphorus flow weighted mean concentration. So the phosphorus concentration within that water, this is from that 2017 Comprehensive Monitoring Review memo that was presented to the board last year. So in the open circle on the top, you can see Himes Lake, that ditch system, not Himes Lake itself, but the ditch system was monitored for several years and had much higher flow weighted mean concentrations compared to even County Line Ditch Site and Bixby Park, which both combine into the Sunrise River and ultimately go to Shallow Pond and then into Comfort Lake. Some of the feedback too that we received from Bowser last year for that tax forfeit Clean Water Fund project was they wanted to see some additional monitoring to really understand the loads going into that project. So we thought this might be a nice opportunity if there was some leftover monitoring budget to incorporate additional sites within this drainage area at the board's discretion to get data this year of loads and look along that drainage area. So within that ditch system, it has about 300 to 500 pounds of phosphorus per year going to the Sunrise River. Sometimes the concentrations of phosphorus get close to 1 milligram per liter, so it can be quite high. So we looked along the system and proposed 4 monitoring stations. So this is zooming in now on that, just the Himes Lake drainage system in particular, to see where along that ditch system the phosphorus concentrations start increasing. Because we know out of Himes Lake it's quite low, and once we enter the Sunrise River, it's quite high. So the 4 spots would be when it first crosses west over 35, when it crosses back east a little further south, prior to the very ditched portion, and then further to the east, essentially before it discharges into the Sunrise River in that tax forfeit area where it's been monitored in the past.
I think this could be very important at this point because of the construction work that's going to be taking place on that Highway 835 interchange. And so if we can get a baseline before all of that starts, it might be really very valuable.
Mm-hmm. The recommendation for the board then would be to authorize the $20,469 for effectiveness monitoring of the 3 projects, but then to consider an additional $8,561 for 4 additional gauge sites along the Himes tributary to identify potential phosphorus hotspots for future implementation, with a total of $29,000, which is still under the budgeted amount.
And just a question, Mike, administrative question. Both of this type of monitoring is in the same budget line item, correct? Or area?
Correct.
Yeah, 3,000 area, okay. So there's really no need to transfer funds from one fund to another. Okay, one area to another.
Except this is, excuse me.
Yes, Manager Schmaltz.
The first part of the discussion was monitoring to assess a BMP. This is monitoring to assess opportunities, so there's different, I mean, this budget was not an assessment budget, it was actually a monitoring budget. So we would, I mean, it should conceptually be in our budget as a separate line item, just like judicial 6, number 6 is, and so forth.
Yeah, but
Now, that's not to say we can't move the money out and move it over, but I think we should make that distinction to keep our budget clean.
right, and I think that because it's in the same area, though, it would be a line item underneath that monitoring. That was my clarification with Mike. It's still underneath the monitoring 3,000 or
Correct.
budget line item, but just identified as a different project. I think the other thing, that this illustrates too is just the adaptive management philosophy that we've always had. And because of that construction on Interstate 35 and 8, that's a big 2-year project. And I think getting this baseline information is important. to see if there's contributing factors, I mean, when the MnDOT starts their project. So I thank EOR for being forward-thinking on that.
I have a question.
Yes, Manager Spence.
Is this the best use of our extra $8,000 some dollars? We just went through an exercise where we didn't have enough money to pay for something else, so.
Right.
I think we need to consider in the bigger picture what we would do with this money if we had our, is this important that we do this Himes Lake thing now? Can we delay it a year? I don't see how the I-35 reconstruction project, maybe you could tell me, I don't see how that's gonna impact this one way or the other because it's so far south.
I would defer to Greg, who's seen those plans.
Yeah, so the permit for the I-35 exchange, I think you're correct, John, that the bulk, if probably not all of that, would not flow through this tributary. It would flow through the Sunrise
Right.
coming across 61 there.
I think that
And
makes
Highway
me hard,
8 would
right?
mix in with that as well.
Anyway, that's just a question. We have an opportunity here that we've got $8,561 freed up that, you know, we budgeted for something and we're not gonna spend it. Is there something better we should spend it on? I personally don't necessarily have a specific opinion. I like the idea of getting this monitoring done if it's, you know, contributing to the flow of phosphorus downstream, but we're probably going to do this monitoring anyway at some point in time in our capital improvement plan.
Manager Schmaltz.
I tend to agree with John. I think we have a number of projects that did make the budget this year, so we can pull those projects out and look at those projects against this one and decide which ones we should actually move forward if we have the money available. Okay, so the second point I wanted to make, though, is that we're getting into monitoring of BMPs right now, not assessment. And I think this is going to be very important for us to substantiate our larger projects. But I think we've just kind of jumped into this, and I think we need to think about a little bit about how we spend our monitoring money on the BMPs. And what I'm proposing, for example, is that we not monitor every BMP we do because we don't have enough money to do that. We should follow the 80-20 rule. In other words, 20% of our projects that give us 80% of the results should be monitored. And if that type of thinking goes forward, then I think we should drop the Hilo Lane one because it only does 12 pounds and it's certainly not in the realm of a major important project. The other reason we might want to do a smaller project would be for some reason like Third Lake Pond, where we had a lot of controversy about that program. We want to substantiate that to the public that it really did work because we had a lot of issues with that project. So that one would qualify, I think. Maybe not because of total phosphorus, but because it's important to the reputation of what we're doing, basically. So I'd just like to throw that out as we move forward. We've got a lot of projects lined up on each individual lake. We can look at the big ones and say, these are the ones we should monitor. Shields Lake, the Moody Lake assessment program. We don't need to monitor, Hilo Lane, so for some of the other smaller ones that we've been doing, so.
Madam President?
Yes, Engineer Greg Kraske.
So, Manager Schmaltz, I think it'd be totally fine to drop Hilo out of this. However, I would point out that we did propose a very limited monitoring on Hilo, just some grab samples and not continuous flow. So it's not a big component of that budget, but if the board wants to remove that from the monitoring, that would be acceptable as well.
Manager Schmaltz.
One other question. I wasn't clear on the budget here. When you talk about taking 8 samples, is that 8 grab samples in total, or is it 8 grab samples per each item that you mentioned that you were going to monitor? In other words, what I'm recommending is you give us a total number of grab samples for a project so we can begin to compare them. I was trying to compare them, and I really couldn't do it because of the language in the proposal.
Right, so.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Do you want to answer that?
Correct, no, that's a good question, and that's a great recommendation for the future scopes. In Bixby, there are 5 sites, so there would be up to 8 grab samples at each, so 40 samples.
So
within
40
Bixby.
samples.
40
And then
water
at
quality.
the Hilo Lane, it would be like 3 samples then or something, right?
I think we're proposing maybe 3 or 4,
Right.
correct?
So that allows us to compare them also as well. Okay,
Yep.
if you could do that in the future, it'd be helpful.
Yep.
Is there any value to this high-low smaller pond in relationship to the work we're doing with the city of Forest Lake to identify stormwater ponds?
No, Madam President, managers, I don't think there would be, but there is, as you may recall, we've had a PCA representative, I think on 2 occasions, where we've tried to partner with them to suggest that we have enough interesting projects, and the iron and hand sand filters is fairly high on that. I mean, I was at a meeting last year in which they specifically asked, any number of area entities that have installed some of these cities, counties, watershed districts to come in and provide information just to advance the body of knowledge with respect to these. So we could continue to try to pursue some of that. You may recall we did a program out on a rural ag property too. I mean, the monitoring does show at least 1 year can show you whether or not the thing is actually working, or if there's something else that got, in that particular case, during the construction portion, unbeknownst to the district, a piece of the line was crushed and the system was not functioning properly. Broadway Avenue also had a similar case where inadvertently somebody probably backed up a dump truck load of material into the ditch and was blocking that. So again, it couldn't dry out and function properly. We don't know. They had that contractor down on that other piece of pipe there trying to correct it. The city did like 3 different times, and the residents were, communicated their frustration that they didn't know what was going on. So to a degree, we also may not know if they somehow damaged our system or any portion of it through that lining process. They may have plugged it or anything else. So without us ever going out there, we may have a system that's draining, but not necessarily treating the water.
Functioning, yeah.
So 1 year for the cost that we're discussing here, I think would be prudent just to make sure the system is actually functioning at all or as designed. Subsequent years, I would recommend that we would not have to go back out there.
Given its location, I think I would agree with that too. It's so close to all that residential area. How much of this $20,469 for tasks 1 and 2 is attributable to task 2 on high-low? You know? Is that a yes, a no, or we don't know?
Oh, I apologize.
Okay.
I'm just trying to do some back of the envelope math. I would say it's under 2,000. Just because we have cost savings with having all 3 sites being monitored together. So there's just additional staff hour to get out to the site and collect those grab samples. But it's not as extensive as the other, so we're not going out 8 times. It's just more on the order of 4.
Okay.
I think to provide assurance that it's working properly and there hasn't been any damage, that I think is a justifiable expense. And as the administrator stated, it doesn't have to be done every year, but you want to make sure that it's functioning properly. Okay.
That's what I think.
Okay.
Okay, question. If it's not functioning properly, what are our options? If we're going to spend the money, then we should be willing to take some action. If we're not going to take any action, if it's not working, we shouldn't spend the money. So I just want to know what the action is going to be.
Madam President, managers, I think 2 things. One is that we have a very good relationship with the city staff in terms of investigating. Was there anything, obstructions or otherwise, that are occurring out there? The other is that we could have our engineer look at it further if we felt that it was not performing properly, to consider, bringing the contractor back in for any corrective action. So, which we also have had a good relationship with on that particular project and others. So, we think that could be remedied. But of course, if you allow some period of time to go past, that warranty period is gone, and they may attribute to something else.
That's gives more rationale for spending the money, I think.
Well, you know, if we put these things in, they have to function. They have to provide the benefit that they are intended to provide. And along with that comes the maintenance, which includes the monitoring. Okay, board, what do you want to do with this item? We need a motion to move.
Can I make a motion that we approve the task 2, but that we hold off on task 3?
You mean 1 and 2?
Well, yeah, task 1 and 2, sorry, the $20,469 task, that we approve that task, but we hold off on task 3 and have staff take another look at where we might have other places to spend that money that, and just, I have nothing against task 3, I think it's a great idea, but is it the thing we should be prioritizing over other things right now? That's the question I would have. Not that we won't spend the money, but is this where we want to spend it?
I'll second your motion.
Further discussion?
Just one point, if we're going to do that, then I think it'd be good if staff could put together a list of 7 or 8 projects that are on the sidelines waiting to be moved up, so that we can see what they are. Everybody can see the same sheet. Heinz, that we had 2 or 3 others this evening, right? So then we could always be in front of us looking at them all the time.
Bring back a table of options, yeah.
Well, this is Himes Lake, so you mean, I don't know what you mean by another Himes project.
For discussion, I also agree with Manager Anderson, though, that if all of a sudden construction starts on 35 and we're seeing big flows downstream of phosphorus, we have no baseline to come back and say, hey, you guys, this is coming from you guys. So.
That's right. Administrator Kenny.
Madam President, managers, well, we do have some information, and that's what precipitated this recommendation initially. So the district monitored for 3 years previously, around 2011, 12, 13, or something like that. And those numbers were consistently on the higher end of what we would expect out of an area like that. Completing the Himes Lake diagnostic monitoring and lake assessment piece was a little bit of a surprise. We thought the lake itself was the source. So the lake, in fact, is a good water quality lake, a shallow lake overall, so that is not the source. And so it's somewhere in between that we have a rising elevation. So this is a typical diagnostic process. You know, trying to evaluate cost efficiencies. There's the additional item here that came to mind for me, I guess professionally, just looking at shallow pond down the road. We know through all the previous diagnostic work and analysis upstream and downstream that area is serving as a phosphorus sink, meaning that the phosphorus coming in is higher than what's going out. At some point in time, that sink will fill up and it will become a phosphorus source. So to extend the life of that natural system, because certainly trying to remedy shallow pond would be a very expensive undertaking. So to try to extend that natural system, there is certainly value in trying to evaluate what options we have from preventing that load from coming in the first place. So by and large, we have a hunch that, again, that there's some legacy piece within this area that is presenting that load to the main channel of the Sunrise River, but we don't know where it is or what its source is, or if it's more diffused or if it's one specific area. But this is fine to table that particular item, so we could also do some other comparatives just as being recommended. But I think this is still floating ever so higher into the realm of what activities that we want to pursue just from a long-term management of these systems. Because it's really an ounce of prevention is really the key on this particular one. Absolutely.
I don't think the motion is to table.
Right.
Item.
No,
Yes.
no.
It's to deny it.
Nope.
So, so I have a problem with that. I really would like to see the overlay of the MnDOT project with this map that we're looking at tonight. Given the fact that that does snake over into the west area of the freeway, I don't know how close that that turn lane is going to be to that, but it's really close. And it could be pulling, it might, I shouldn't say could, it might pull from that western area from 35. That's the part that I was concerned about.
Madam President, so the 35W project does not go that far north.
Okay.
If you look at the bottom of that map where
Here we go.
Bixby is labeled,
Yep,
you can see
it's
the
pulled up now,
the
yep.
interchange there. So
Uh-huh.
it goes slightly north of that, but the reconstruction of 35 does not go all the way up to where those,
It wouldn't have any effect anyway, right?
not directly
I mean,
to that
not
tributary,
directly.
but it would to
Do
those
you know how,
stations
do you know
along
how
Sunrise.
wide that turn-off lane is going to be, though? Because it's going to loop back around under the freeway. Correct? It's going to,
Correct, I
where
don't,
there's no southbound. Is there going to be a northbound
No,
exit on this one?
not right
No?
now.
Okay.
They're just doing the loop. The one leaf of a clover leaf at currently where Highway 8 comes over 35, they're just basically going to go back north and then come south. So they're going to go maybe even a tenth of the way up to where the water crosses 35 at the south side. So
Yeah.
they're not even going to get close. But there could be impacts into Bixby, and that's more likely where we're going to see
Yeah.
big impacts.
Yeah, well, we've got data on that.
Right, so,
But-
but I think this Himes Lake thing, and we do have monitoring data at 61, right? On this Himes Lake channel, someplace in there.
A little farther out.
Okay, but, so we do have some data to go back on if we ever needed to.
But some of those exit ramps can be quite lengthy. You know, they're not real tight turns, so they are going to expand out a little bit. But I would be more in favor of tabling for more information on Himes and not eliminating it.
Well, I wasn't trying to eliminate it. I only wanted to hold it in abeyance for another, at least one more meeting, to have staff go back and take a look at how we might have other options to spend that $8,561 right now.
So is that clear in the motion? Okay,
If not, I will.
Well, I'm checking with our recorder.
You said hold.
Yeah.
Okay, all
Don't
right.
kill it.
And then I'll re-second if I need to second again.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is Little Comfort Diagnostic Scope of Work.
Madam President and managers, on to another lake management district. Switch my image here. So ultimately, this is a proposed scope of work for the 2018 phase of monitoring the Little Comfort drainage area, but I thought it might be helpful to summarize what was completed in 2016 and 2017 and how that relates with 2018. This is another area we've been working on a multi-year adaptive management approach, and it's been interesting to me to see how the results come out, so I thought you might want to see this whole story. So in 2016, what I'm showing, and this is in the memo, just the figure, showing the monitoring results from the tributary monitoring along, the focus in 2016 was really along the main tributary. So the inlet into Little Comfort Lake had been monitored for a long period of time as the Bone Lake outlet as part of the district stream monitoring program. So we monitored along several locations. We also were trying to identify any other tributaries that might come in from the north or south into that tributary, and that's where we monitored along this July Avenue tributary, about in the center of that Bone to Little Comfort tributary. And that was in the 2016 monitoring that we saw significantly higher phosphorus concentrations coming out of that tributary, contributing to the Little Comfort Bone Lake tributary, the main tributary itself. So then, in the approach we've taken in 2017, what we had proposed and completed was additional monitoring upstream of that July Avenue tributary station that we monitored in 2016. So we monitored there again in 2017 and then worked our way up in that watershed. And it's a little hard to see in this image. I should have put some blue arrows like I have in the past, but essentially from the July Avenue tributary monitoring station, the tributary goes north or upstream, crosses 246, and then continues northeast and then branches. And so It drains a portion of the west area, that was the west branch. So you can see we had that monitoring station. And then there's also another branch off to the east that drains another portion of that drainage area. What we consistently observed in 2017 was very turbid water and very high phosphorus concentration water coming out of that west branch site compared to the other two. They both had high phosphorus concentrations that we monitored. We weren't able to get continuous flow. Once we get further upstream, oftentimes it's not possible to get that. We made visual observations of flow and recorded that to compare to that July Avenue tributary. So there was still flow at West Branch to collect samples from, and some of those concentrations, they were all over 1 milligram per liter. And we're talking, a goal of 200 parts per billion, or 0.2 compared to 1. So it just had really, really high phosphorus concentrations, still at least a substantial amount of flow, and very high orthophosphorus and TSS concentrations as well.
Megan,
So that,
can I ask you a question real quickly? What can you tell us about that land mass by the West Branch monitoring?
right, so it drains a agricultural field that has some rotating crops, and there's also some livestock there as well.
Okay.
So visual observations, there's room for improvement in that area, and it's pretty much owned by 1 or 2 landowners.
Manager?
Just to the northeast of that yellow pin where it says West Branch, that farm that's just to the northeast. I've driven up there quite a few different times, and so straight across from the farm buildings to the west, on the west side of July Avenue, I know he's got some pasture land that he's had cattle in. I don't recall what kind of cattle they are or whatever, but I know there's been cattle straight across the road, and it looks to me from the aerial map, because I've zoomed in on this quite a few times, and right from where the buildings are, it looks like there's a drainage area that goes off to the southeast, right out of the barnyard there also.
Okay.
So, and I know that's where he's got kind of a feedlot for his cattle, is just kind of, right in there by the buildings.
So we need some ag BMP work in that area. Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyway, that's.
Another question.
Yes, Manager Schmaltz.
The July Avenue trib box has 423 pounds of phosphorus in it. What are the phosphorus levels on the other 2 boxes? Or do we know that? You know, if you go back to the first map on the second page, the July Avenue main, is it, let's see.
That was from 2016.
Okay. So actually, the July Avenue tributary box has 426 pounds of phosphorus estimated to come through there, right? And now you split that into 2 other boxes, 246th Street and West Branch. How many pounds of phosphorus are in each of those boxes? Do we know that yet or not?
So the second figure is from the 2017 monitoring, but we did, I'm trying to think if we collected continuous flow in that location to calculate a load. I'd have to look back, but at West Branch and 246, we don't have any continuous flow, so we can't equate it to a phosphorus load.
So do we have to do additional work to find out whether it's worth working on then or not?
No, at these further, the sites that are further up, there's just too little flow to ever get continuous flow gauging.
Okay.
So then at that point, what the monitoring here is showing, they're fairly close together, so the flow doesn't change significantly amongst all the sites compared to the drainage area. It's just the relative comparison of the phosphorus concentrations, and we have the visual observations of flow to know that they're not substantially different. So it's the water quality sampling from 2017 just gives us the extra data. If we were to pursue a larger project and wanted to pursue a grant application, that we've gone back, kind of looked within this whole watershed and pinpointed this portion over some of the other areas. But we may work through the Ag BMP program, working with that landowner, but that's what this data can be used for.
And I'm a little confused because in your verbiage here, it says that quality improvement project should begin in the West Branch drainage area, followed by the 246th Street drainage area. If we don't know the total pounds of phosphorus, how can you make that statement?
Just based on high phosphorus concentration values.
But if there's no flow, the total amount of phosphorus is negligible, right? I'm just trying to understand, if you don't have the numbers,
So with this type of data, with our observations of just the water level and flow estimates when we're out just collecting a grab sample, and the drainage area, so we went out throughout the year to kind of see what was occurring. We can make more of a qualitative estimate based on what we know from the July Avenue tributary, but you're right, it wouldn't be as quantitatively rigorous as we can at some other stations. And I think when we're doing this kind of monitoring approach where we start at a large scale and start working and fine tuning in, necessarily that's what will happen. So our target will be that load we have from July Avenue tributary, we can make some sort of estimate just based on the acreage of the drainage area to the West Branch compared to the other sites to kind of split that load, and we know the concentrations are higher. But it wouldn't be as quantitative, but we'd have more of a qualitative estimate of the portion.
but then we would go in and look for projects in those areas.
Correct,
Okay.
right.
Just to clarify though, when you give a range like this, on the July Avenue, for example, in 2017, 300 to 2,200 parts per billion, precipitation has a lot to do with that. And so you're looking at low flow concentrations and high or upper end concentrations during flood events. So what this tells me is that we've got high phosphorus sources that kind of sit there through most of the time, but when you get a big rain event, you've got all of that phosphorus then running down through the stream or the flow or the river. And so that is something that we want to make sure doesn't happen. So I think you have to take that into account when you're looking at these more concentrated 2017 sites. Yes, Manager Mo?
One other observation I had when I, because it was a couple years ago, I drove out here too, and where 245th Street is, and 246th Street, those are all new houses out there, or fairly new. I don't know exactly what year they were built, but when I drove out there, there was a lot of lots that had just freshly graded yards, and the yards weren't established yet, so that could have caused some higher loads because of that, I assume.
Right.
I don't know what year those were built, but probably in the last 5, right? A lot of these houses on 245th and 246th.
Madam President, managers.
Yes.
So a number of those were built as many as 10 years ago or more. So that development has been in place, and many of those homes were there certainly 4 years ago, prior to my start date. But there have been infilling of remaining open lots with the main contractor out there. So
I just know when I drove through there was several lots that were,
yes,
and they're fairly decent sized yards.
right, and that is an area where previously there might be the case where some of the erosion control wasn't as strictly adhered to. But the other piece on some of this, I think which Dr. Funke is trying to state, at least from our understanding of the method that was used here, is when it comes to some of the ag stuff, we've been talking about an ag BMP program, tier 1, tier 2 kind of piece. There's an item which I'll plan to bring to the April board meeting that'll help refine some of that work. But presently, we know that I can communicate with the Chisago SWCD staff about what our findings are, and then what relationship they have with the property owner, and make an initial contact about what we can perhaps get out there. And then as we see what options are out there for BMPs or structural practices, we can determine then whether or not more monitoring is needed to justify the cost.
Okay. Anything further?
Yes, so that actually leads to 2018. So in 2017 as well, we took a few grab samples from the Heath Avenue pipe. So we covered the main tributary to Little Comfort Lake coming from Bone Lake. So the remaining area was the that drain pipe from the neighborhood to the southwest that discharges into a wetland just south of Highway 8. So we had a few grab samples from 2017 with the concentrations. They weren't, they were in the low to moderate range, I would say, for what I've seen from the whole watershed. But when in the spring there was what seemed to be higher flows, but it was hard to give an estimate from a smaller pipe. So what we're proposing for 2018 for the final phase remaining original budget for the whole comprehensive Little Comfort monitoring to get to assess where the phosphorus sources are coming from is to put a flow gauge at the pipe for a full monitoring season with the water quality grab samples, same approach as the other sites we've proposed today. Develop a rating curve and estimate what that phosphorus load actually is. In conjunction, we'll have the Little Comfort Inlet monitoring site again from Washington Conservation District, so it'll be interesting to compare the two numbers to see how they compare in terms of total flow and load to Little Comfort Lake, so that we can answer that question. So the cost for just that one site to set up that flow network and look in the inlet and the outlet of that pipe to estimate a total load and compare it to the other loads going into Comfort Lake is about $7,300. So,
I move that we approve the work.
I second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
great, thank you.
I think we're done. Good luck with your appointment. I hope you get there on time. Or have you missed it already?
I can do it later, so.
All right, okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll go back to D, item D under new business, 6, permit 18-002.
Madam President and managers, Jessica, could you pull up the exhibit for that project? Looking for my report here. So what we have here is permit 18-002. This is the Forest Lakes Safe Routes to School project. So this is just kind of northwest of City Hall here. There's several schools in this area, actually 3 elementary schools and a junior high. And what the city is proposing is to add trail segments along 3rd and 8th and some of the surrounding streets to provide connections between the schools and residential areas. They are proposing to install 2 biofiltration basins, as you can see on that figure there. They are sized to meet the required volume requirements per our rules, and I'll just note that that's per our new rules, which require runoff from the 1.1 inch event. Our new rules do have an exemption for trails, but this project does not qualify for that exemption because they're not routing the flow across pervious area. The trail segments are immediately adjacent to the road and flowing to the road for the most part. Some of it is going to adjacent green areas. So they've sized it for that drainage area. It's about 0.2 acres of additional impervious, so not a whole lot. One other thing I just want you to note is not all of the trail segments are going directly to those basins. The drainage from that drainage area is such that, you know, all the roads and all the trails kind of come together into a pipe network, generally makes its way down 3rd Avenue. So they're capturing a combination of trail water and street water, enough so that it's offsetting their required volume. So it's meeting the volume requirement. In terms of rate control, there's a very slight reduction in rates, so it's meeting the rate requirements. So it's meeting all the district stormwater requirements, and then they have a detailed erosion control plan that they've submitted, and it's meeting all the district's requirements for that. So my recommendation is approval with the 2 conditional items in there. One of them is just that I want a little bit more detail on the pre-treatment and the vegetation that they're going to put in those biofiltration items. And the second item is just, it's more just a stipulation that they need to abide by the maintenance agreement that's already in place between the city of Forest Lake and the Watershed District.
I move that we approve permit application 18002, contingent upon completing the recommendations number 1 and 2 as stated.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, 2017 draft monitoring report.
Madam President, managers, just as noted, as in past years, the district has received the draft report. It is available for staff and board review. Given its length, we did not print it out, but if you would like a hard copy, you can let us know. And then we ask that, if at all possible, provide feedback to either staff or the Conservation District before April 13th. And then we'll plan to present a final version at April 19th regular board meeting.
Okay, I'm requesting a printed copy.
Yeah, I would like a printed copy on, well, at least on the final.
Okay.
Can we I would just like to borrow one, and maybe somebody else can use it after I get done with it.
Okay.
I like to mark mine up, so.
I do too, but
I'd
I
like
mean, you
to-
can still
yeah,
read
yeah.
around it. Not that thick, right?
We'll share.
I can't find the resolution for the next item. Clean Water Fund. We're done with the draft monitoring report?
Correct.
Oh, yeah, we did.
We did
Okay.
that.
Oh, this is out of place then. Okay. No, we didn't do this.
Yeah, we already approved the grant agreement. That was Megan's thing. F and F, we moved those up a
That
little.
was the
Oh, okay, I moved the, okay,
Agreement
that's what
with
I did.
Brown
I didn't catch those other 2 papers. Thank you, John.
Yep.
All right, next item is the G, Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District Partnership.
Madam President, managers, you may recall that the 2 districts had discussed a shared technician position. I think it's been on the budget consideration for about the last 5 or 6 years even. And so while that has been kind of an ongoing discussion, more recently, Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District Administrator, Mr. Jim Shaver, had talked to me about this particular activity. We already have a joint relationship in terms of our education program between Carnelian Marine and Browns Creek and ourselves. And one of the things that when we met, and certainly was encouraged by County Commissioner Miron, was for us to continue to collaborate for purposes of efficiencies. So through this evaluation, one of the things then that the district looked at, and also looking at the future One Watershed, One Plan partnerships that we will continue to be a part of going forward. Mr. Shaver expressed an interest in the district assisting in a couple of areas, principally in the area of site inspections, which is currently contracted out to their engineering service, and the other is in the assistance in drafting their initial framework for the watershed management plan. They're preparing to develop their next 10-year plan. So while they will continue to use their engineer for services related to the technical elements in that piece, Mr. Shaver has shared with his board the structure and format of our plan and how clean it is and easy to follow, both from budgeting side and systems side, that he's interested in making that at least administratively a structure for their district as well. And also, as noted, we're going to anticipate more partnerships with respect to the One Watershed, One Plan activities. So through that discussion then, we developed a draft work plan for their consideration. Their board has reviewed it, along with the technical services agreement. They did ask for one more thing, and that was for an additional exhibit in terms of staff qualifications, et cetera. And so we just put that together, and that request came in after the board packet was out. So, but it's really just summarizing the staff and their skill sets related to these activities. So, like other areas, the district staff and the summer assistant that we plan to bring in here is at a much more cost-effective rate than they can contract out through their engineering services, and so they're interested in pursuing this. So if the board is interested, we did work it through our budgetary component, is also trying to make sure that we could fit that in with, I mean, we would anticipate a certain amount of money back. We will, just like in other scenarios, just like with the Washington Conservation District, provide them a monthly invoice based on actual hours of service performed. And then that would help offset our expenses for the staff.
Okay. I have a couple of questions here. I'm not sure about this handout that you just gave us, why we have 3 different staff people's qualifications. This is going to be, is the intention to use any one of these 3 or just one dedicated person to share?
Nope, it would be a particular, let's see, in the scope of services piece of the agreement, it's Exhibit A. It's the second to the last page on the back side.
The contract? I'm sorry.
Correct, of the
Yeah.
contract. This Exhibit A is the
Yeah.
scope of services. So there's a number of hours for permitting, permitting inspections, assistance with the 10-year watershed management plan, at least presently, and then also some nominal hours in education and outreach.
So again, the question is, is the intention to use each of these people in a cooperative manner and not just one person?
Correct, based
Correct.
on these particular subsets of
Okay.
their requests of services.
Okay. You had mentioned hiring another technician, a seasonal technician to perform permit site inspections and support watercraft inspections?
Like we did last year.
Okay.
But this would now be spending more time doing inspections in Kearney Marine.
So the new person is going to be doing, yeah, well, it's not Aaron, it's somebody else.
It'd be a seasonal technician, right?
Yeah.
That is comparable to our boat launch inspections. The cost, I mean, what we'll cost is or charge is $20 an hour. But that rate to them is, as I understand it, half or 40% of what they're currently charging or getting charged for the inspections. So,
Yeah. Well, my concern is mostly for us, of course, not Carnelian.
Correct.
But so let me just go through these issues, and then maybe they can be addressed at the end, and maybe one leads to another or something. My concern, first of all, is that this is the busiest season for both districts, and I didn't see any method of prioritization. So if we become busy and we can't share a person during that period, is there a way to establish a priority? So that would be number one. I didn't see that addressed. And then the other two or three things have to do with more the contract language, I think. The statement in the middle of paragraph 1, he plans for all work associated, this is Carnelian, I would imagine, Mr. Shaver. He plans for all work associated with the amendment to be performed by EOR if a shared staffing arrangement is not reached. I thought that whole paragraph, that's maybe one of the highlights, but that seems to conflict with section 2 of the contract language. So the contract language is very specific to an independent contractor reference. And we don't have one individual, we have numerous individuals, so I wonder if that doesn't need to be tightened up a little bit. And he's referring to a staffing arrangement. This isn't going to be a staff person, it's going to be a consultant. So we want to make sure that we're not referencing anything to do with staffing Carnelian. It's a consulting position or contractor position. There also, I think, could be a problem with this individual being used for permit action and review action by another district. What type of liability does our district carry if there is an issue? Paragraph 2 in the overview background talks about that. And when I look at section 4 of the contract, I see a little bit more liability for us and not as much protection as I would like to see. Under 5, compensation, it talks about mileage in particular. It doesn't mention cell phone or email. There is a reference to providing a computer from Carnelian. But what about cell phone usage? There doesn't seem to be anything specified for reimbursement for those types of things. 7, the waiver. I think that is really broad. I'm not sure that provides us with enough protection if something goes amiss. And then number 8 in the contract talks about insurance. And my question is, I understand this is written for us, but does the other district, Carnelian, carry insurance? They do, I think in the waiver, section 7, right before that, it seems to be more burden on us than it does on Carnelian. And there is a statement, again, from them that this is not going to be a staff position, but when they are issuing permits and doing inspections, I think there needs to be some language that protects the district that's a little tighter than what I saw in that contract. So those are my technical issues. I do think that the issue with the season, that's our busy season too. I don't know what kind of activity Carnelian has, but we have a pretty busy May through December schedule. So I don't want to have our district suffer because we have an obligation to perform for another one. Yes, Manager Mo?
One question I had was just with the hourly rate that Jackie brought up, cell phones and all that stuff, but so the hourly rate that we would be charging them covers benefits and everything. Okay.
Okay, any other comments from the board? Manager Schmaltz?
How much staff do they have over there besides the
Just the administrator,
just the administrator?
correct.
Okay. And then I guess the concern I have is that you talk about plan amendment, a watershed, 10-year watershed management plan amendment, but yet they want to go to our format. That means redoing their whole plan, doesn't it?
Correct, over several years,
Over several years, not
Right.
1 year.
correct.
Okay.
Madam President,
I guess I'm concerned, you know, and as I understand it, we're only going to hire one person, right, this summer, one summer technician. So we're not hiring anybody else to do this. It's going to be done with the current people we have.
correct, but Madam President, managers.
Yes.
So last year, we had a seasonal technician
Right.
and did a variety of tasks, including inspections for us, as well as boat launch inspection and some other work. So this year, so what we do annually is work through a detailed work plan by line item and by month. So we did that with Mr. Shaver in January, that we went through conceptually what this would look like from a staffing capacity standpoint, given our present workload, such that we would not overload the current staff nor have them underemployed. So this seasonal technician would, to a degree, be intended to be aligned with that extra work. So there is also some work that we have presented to the board to be involved with the One Watershed, One Plan activity. So that's a couple hundred hours or so that we did not have last year. So we will get reimbursed through the Lower St. Croix One Watershed, One Plan planning effort over the next 18 months to participate and do that. But it still takes away from our ability to do activities within the district. So we have this sort of right-sizing issue that we come into play. Of course, Mr. Shaver then has these additional pieces of a 10-year plan amendment is fairly substantial level of work. We make a point of meeting the administrators, of course, quarterly statewide, but then more frequently locally in Washington County. He's observed what the plan structure is on ours and feels like it's a very good structure to follow for a lot of reasons that you're aware of. So the hours are then ones that we feel that by adjusting would fit our overall work plan. And of course, there's still always more things that could be done. I mean, Mike, for example, could do a lot of the plant or in-lake plant analysis work that we were considering with Steve McComas, but it's really a matter of that we don't have the boat and also we don't have the time. So we talked about even more recently about maybe contract or trying to get a GIS license. And so while that's interesting and we could do a certain amount of work and we contract out that work presently, the one thing that we don't have is time, staff-wise. So it's always a thing about trying to balance the needs of the district and providing as much value as possible, to the level of service that we're providing to the citizens. So This is a method that will help really both the district here, but also develop that regional partnership, which is of interest, of course, to the commissioners and others to see this move forward.
I think financially, it's good. We're giving up half a person, but we're getting $32,000 back, which is a good hourly rate, so I think we should be okay there. I share President Anderson's concern about Administrator Schaefer doesn't have any other employees except these people that are gonna be working for him, so he's gonna have nobody else to call except our people. So, you know, if he's calling our people and they have to be in the field, there's gonna be an issue there, I think. So I think you have to work out some way that, because he only has our people who work for him, so it's gonna be an issue a little bit, I think.
Madam President, he'll continue to have the contracted services available both through the Washington Conservation District and the engineering
Okay.
services through EOR. So that'll always still be available.
The big
That'll
saving-
help.
This is a
That'll help,
savings
but-
for him,
Right.
not so much
Right,
for us.
so this will,
Okay.
I would recommend, in the interest of time here, that this issue be tabled until the April meeting. And I really am very concerned about this contract language. And I would like to have the board's agreement to let me work with the administrator and Chuck to make sure that we're protected.
Where did the contract come from? From them?
no, it's our standard language,
From where?
our standard contract. It's our contract.
So Chuck has looked at it then.
Well, yes. Chuck, did you want to respond?
No, it is basically our template, adjusted for this case as we do. But I'd be happy to walk through it with the president and discuss the rationales and make any adjustments. and bring
I
it back
guess
in
my
April.
question is, if our legal staff has looked at it and put it together, we need to trust our legal staff, so why don't we just go with it?
Well, that's certainly the option. I just find those areas to be troublesome. So if you want to do it, make a motion.
Well, is there any time sensitivity to the result?
Madam President, managers, well, from the standpoint that we just completed interviews and we found a very excellent candidate that's done a variety of work and is currently is scheduled to go back to graduate school next January. So he's very interested in a summer position with a watershed district to gain watershed management experience because that's going to be his focus of study for his master's degree. So we would like to extend that offer and not have that person leave or get a different position elsewhere. So it could be maybe conditionally approved.
I don't see why we can't, if we can't approve this tonight, I think we can probably, we're gonna hire a part-time, summer intern anyway, right? This person? Or is this different than the summer intern you were talking about?
No, this is it, yeah. This is
Same
it.
person, right?
Right.
So we could approve that, we know we're gonna do that, and this is separate, I mean, that's part of this whole program, but it's a separate program, but he's part of it, so I don't see any reason why you can't go ahead and make that offer. I mean, we've already agreed to it, right, in our budget, so. The other concern I have is that we got extra legal time to go over this contract again, and that adds up again, and extra costs, and I think we either, unless Chuck has some concern, our legal staff has some concern about the contract based upon President Anderson's comments.
I would just say, another option would be to take the recommended motion and adjust it to say that the administrator is authorized upon review by council and concurrence by the president. And then, rather than waiting until next April, we'd be able to talk with the president and move forward if President Anderson is then satisfied.
That would expedite things.
How urgent is your timing, Mike? I mean, you said it's urgent. Is it like within 4 days or within 2 weeks or? Because it's gonna take time to get together and go through this. I know it's gonna take time.
No, but I mean, so have developed a work plan, and I think that, either way, Carnegie Marine, we've waited 4 years or so, I mean.
But you want to get your key person in that you like, right? So.
We're going to get that anyway.
Right, we could get them to training and then get them started. I do want to clarify one other item too, is that the intent would not have any of the district staff being issuing permits, but rather just taking receipts, making sure that all the items are sort of checked. Most of their permits that they issue are for single-family homes, and Mr. Shaver would still execute and issue the permits. But presently, everything is being reviewed and processed externally. So again, what limited hours there would be again a savings to that district.
Well, in the interest of moving things forward, I would make the motion to approve this technical services agreement with the language here in the proposed motion, except that final review by council and concurrence by the president and no substantial changes.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to the LCCMR grant proposal resolution.
And President and Managers, district, as you know, has been looking to continue to pursue new grant opportunities. And through the LCCMR grant program, so they have a two-step process. One is just to submit a draft grant proposal for their review, and then we would see if it proceeds any further. However, through that, they also want this attached resolution for authority to actually submit the grant proposal. So one item that with this particular proposal that was submitted, I reviewed several years worth of submitted grant requests and what was approved. And so they tend to be more towards university or science focused. So we try to focus that on that element of the district's work. The project in consideration that we proposed as part of this management analysis approach that the district has undertaken through adaptive management and diagnostic studies is this section of the Sunrise that's highly eroded and we know is contributing a large load both in sediment and in phosphorus to Comfort Lake. We also know in our recent meetings with the city of Wyoming that we have, or they hold, an 80-foot easement from the center of the Sunrise, so 40 on each side. Maybe not as far as we would need if we wanted to do a full restoration of that section of the Sunrise River, if there was nothing there, so to speak. But it's fully developed, and by being fully developed for some number of years, a lot of those trees, box elder, tag alder, whatever, grown up, shaded up, and there's a lot of erosion. So we would probably not likely pursue completing sort of a reestablishment of a tiered bank system, but rather one where we would try to work within the area that we have. The EOR cost proposal or estimate on this is roughly $1 million. Given some constraints that we know about what the easements we hold, I don't think we would go through the effort to try to obtain a lot more. I don't think people are going to want more of their backyards worked over. And then also if you look at the topography in the area and general geography of the Sunrise, we probably would focus more on opening up the south and southeast areas to get the sunlight in and reestablishing that work. So also given some number of years of experience in working in this particular area, I pulled back the cost estimate. So I want to make sure the board was aware of that, but I felt that it also helped make it more competitive to get that kind of work done. So there is that piece of it that.
And this is for a project for 2019?
Correct, it would start, right.
Okay.
If it was so funded, but there's also the second piece that has to still go in if they come back and give us the nod to even pursue the application.
Right, but this is a preliminary step for the 2019 budgeting and it sets it in motion, so.
Correct.
So that's really the intent. Okay, this would be a resolution? there a motion to adopt?
I'll make the motion to adopt Resolution 18-03-02.
I'll second.
Okay, motion's,
Quick question, the motion, resolution has 18303 on it, not 1802.
I see the same. 180302, 180302.
Well, I'm sorry, I must be having the wrong program.
Yeah,
This is
it
the-
says the same.
Okay, I'm
All right,
sorry.
motion's been made and seconded to adopt
Okay, my
Resolution
mistake.
180302.
Right.
It's a roll call vote. Jackie Anderson, aye. John Spence?
Aye.
Wayne Moe?
Aye.
Stephen Schmaltz?
Aye.
Jackie McNamara, absent. I declare the resolution 180302 has been adopted, unanimous by the members present. Next item under old business. By the way, I am going to take a 5-minute bio break for everyone, so we don't have people coming and going between the old business and the new business and old business, okay? So we have one item left, and that's 2017 MRAP annual report, East Metro Water Resource Education Program.
And President Managers, incorporated into the board packet here is the educational update, their 2018 activity outline, as well as a couple other notices and their 2017 annual report. As noted, Angie Hong will be available on April 19th if the board requests her to come and provide some answers, both to answer questions with respect to the 2017 work that was completed and the projected work for 2018.
Right. So we're just accepting this report tonight. I just have one comment. That Shoreland Properties seminar for realtors and appraisers, I thought is really phenomenal. We've talked about having one done here in our district. So my only question that I hope you can ask Angie before she comes in April is, can we do one of these in Forest Lake? Okay? And within our boundaries. Okay. So with that, I'm going to declare a 5-minute bio break, and we will reconvene at 5 minutes to 9.
February 22nd board meeting, the board expressed an interest in providing some specific loan application and for input on that process. And so to date, if you still have any input on what that might be, please let staff know. But there are a couple items that still need to be completed for us to move into the next phase of this. Incorporated into this board item is the loan application for review, what it would look like. And then also a resolution, 18-0303, to submit the Clean Water Partnership loan for the loan program itself. In addition, then we have here then, as part of the loan application items, a colored handout of different projects that we have, by advice of the PCA staff, lumped together to a certain degree in different categories to make up the dollar amount that we would look to request. In addition, then, on advice of both council and of Northland Securities, we have contacted a firm for bond counsel assistance. And as you can read through that, this is an item really of seemingly little to no concern, I guess, or at least they had no comments at this point. But there would still offer to provide that service in a ballpark range of $5,000 to $6,000. So we have a recommended motion then to retain them for this service. Well, first of all, to transfer $7,000 from the reserve funds for that purpose, and then to retain them for the purpose of the bond fund, assisting with the PCA Clean Water Partnership loan.
Okay.
So there are 3 action items here for this particular item.
What's the third? I just,
The resolution
yeah?
as part of the first one, and then 2 motions in the.
Oh, the 2 motions.
Oh, yes, okay, right.
In which order should we do them in?
Well, I think we probably better approve the loan first, and then we'll go to the, because without the loan, we don't need the other people. Yeah, I just have a question on the loan. It was, and there's probably a simple explanation for it, but we've budgeted for the Moody Lake alum treatment, for example. The Bone Lake drained wetland, to my knowledge, has been part of our budget. So where you have items that are part of the budget, that is just going to free up monies for other things? Or why do we have those listed if we've already budgeted for them?
Madam President, managers, what those amount to is the required match. So for the Moody Lake alum treatment, that the board this evening then approved the grant agreement with Bowser. So the grant is $135,000, our match was $100,000. That is not in our budget. We have a 0 line item because we didn't know whether or not we were gonna get that. So we would need to do a budget adjustment at some point this calendar year, as we have in the past, or at least most recently last year. Once we get the grant, then we can go back and incorporate into the budget, make a budget adjustment for the match portion. So this would be then the source for that grant.
Right, well, we did
Match.
we did budget for it, but we had $500,000 in a loan. That was part of our discussion. So this is just encapsulating those items that we did discuss during that period. And plus a few more, it looks like.
Well, the board, in fact, yes, did incorporate an element that was intending to obtain $500,000 for a loan. But on the budget itself, for the Moody Lake alum treatment, it was a $0 amount for the approved budget as stands.
Well, we've got 2 different things going on, though.
Right.
We've got the budget, we've got the levy. So we're talking about the levy being at 1.2, and then we had a $500,000 loan that we were pursuing of one kind or another. And we ended up with this CWP loan because of its 0 interest and 10-year amortization. So we did budget for these items in our discussions, and it's being paid for through this loan application.
Correct.
All right, so then the other $1 million is for us to proceed with some of the other things that have been on our capital plan, or excuse me, our management plan. And we'll get those started before the end of that 10-year period, correct?
We will have 3 years to expend the loan funds and request the reimbursement. And then the 10-year repayment starts after that.
That's correct, but I was talking about our plan. Our plan is through 2021, so we can get some of those projects that have been lagging started before the end of that current plan period. So
True.
that
Yes,
is what we
yes.
talked about,
Yes.
and that is what the staff has put together here.
Right.
So I just wanted to clarify that. Is there any other comments or questions anyone has?
So is this loan that we're taking out, is this just for projects that we've got coming up? Is that, or that are?
The vast majority of it, there would be, if you look at the very last section, item 11 and 12, for district-wide public education programs, there are 2 items, each $20,000, for a total of $40,000. The rest are all for implementation for projects, yes. Over the next 3 years.
So the first item of action then is to, a motion to approve the application.
I'll move to adopt resolution 18-03-03.
I second.
Any further comments on that? Didn't we just do 03 on that last?
No, that was
roll
02.
call? Okay, we did, okay, just to make sure. All right, this is a roll call vote. Jackie Anderson, aye. John Spence?
Aye.
Wayne Moe?
Aye.
Stephen Schmaltz?
Aye.
Jackie McNamara is absent. I, as president, declare the resolution has been adopted unanimously by the members present. Okay, and the next item is the sheet that we were just handed.
We need bond counsel to oversee the loan.
Yep, that was just handed out tonight,
I know, why do we need it?
because it's required by statute. Manager Schmaltz is asking why we need the special
counsel.
bond counsel that's represented in the memo that just was passed out, and perhaps Administrator Kenny, you can address that.
Madam President, managers, yes, it is required for public entities to take out a loan or bond, which of course, in the eyes of the state, they're the same thing. So we had the representative from Northland Securities here, they communicated the same thing as, and also our legal counsel has advised the same.
This is a requirement of taking out the loan effectively, so, yeah.
So what value do they add? I mean, is it an insurance policy for us, or, I mean, because most of the work was done by the loan people themselves in filling out the form, right? You worked with them to fill out the application.
Well, Emily did, yes.
And so,
Attorney
I'm just
Holtman?
wondering, it's a good profession to be in, it looks to me, like.
Attorney Holtman?
Madam Chair, board members, it's recognized as a specialized field, and in particular, chiefly the element is that that bond counsel needs to provide an opinion in conjunction with the issuance of the bonds that is a basis for reliance by the bond purchasers on the terms of the bond. And it's, again, it's specialized. There are firms that are recognized and whose opinions are accepted, in addition to which it's from a matter of professional responsibility and insurance coverage. It's a field that one has to be covered in separately. It's not a field that we practice in, Smith Partners, but firms do practice in that, and those are the ones who are who need to originate the opinion that accompanies the bond.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion.
Any, let's just, before you get started, let's do motion 2 first.
Motion 2 first?
Yeah.
All right, I will make a motion to authorize the administrator on advice of counsel to retain Kutak Rock LLP as bond counsel and to incur fees not to exceed $7,000 for the purpose of securing an MPCA Clean Water Partnership loan.
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further comments, questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous passage. Number, Wayne, if you'll do number 1 or someone?
Then I will also make a motion to transfer $7,000 from the current unreserved fund balance 000-2900-01 in Fund 1-004-4410.
I will second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item is the Lower St. Croix One Watershed, One Plan Committee appointment for Policy Committee.
Madam President, managers, the Lower St. Croix One Watershed, One Plan planning team has completed the majority of the work to complete the work plan required of Bowser for that planning grant. And that was submitted and executed or approved today by Bowser. So we're into the next phase. So we'll have a partnership agreement with Chisago County that is we taking the, or acting as the entity for the grant and reporting purposes. In addition then to the planning committee that staff has been a part of, there would also be a policy committee. And that would be one entity from those entities that are participating, which presently is, I think, 15 of the 18. So some are still considering. So there, this would be a committee that would go through the term of the process, probably about 18 months. There'd be an initial meeting coming up, then the staff and the planning team will bring forth a few things, start working on an RFP with a consultant to assist this. Again, there's going to be a fair amount of this project that we're planning that will be done by and through the staff level. And then as the plan starts to develop, the individuals as part of the policy committee will then start providing their input into the overall direction. Presently, the policy committee members must be a board member of one of the entities participating.
Okay,
Are there responsibilities listed anywhere in terms of how many meetings you'd have to attend and so forth and so forth?
There were roughly,
Service?
there were, as noted in the planning grant process, so there'd be one initially coming up here to execute whatever contract there is with whoever would do the assisting portion. Then there'd probably be some number of months, 4 to 5 or so, before there'd be another policy committee meeting. And then we would expect anywhere from probably 6 to 8 additional meetings beyond that until it's completed from the policy team
throughout the year, or,
through its completion,
okay.
Which is 2 years?
18 months.
18 months.
18 months.
But planning efforts sometimes go longer, but depending on that. But that's the current timeline.
Any volunteers?
No, I can't do it.
Not me.
You want to do it?
Thumb
have the time?
wrestle.
Does every board have to have a policy member on the committee? Is that why we're offering, or it's?
Want your voice to be heard.
It would be expected that there would be a member if you're participating as an entity. And we have communicated that we would by approving the MOA.
Can the backup be a staff person, or does it have to be a board person?
That'll be decided at the first meeting.
Right now, it's not staff, though.
Correct.
Right now, it has to be.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying that, you know, I travel a lot, and if I'm gone or something like that, so. But would this be recognized as a official meeting for as a board member?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nobody else wants to do it, right?
I
Did
cannot.
Jackie call you and volunteer?
Pardon me?
Did Jackie McNamara call you and volunteer?
No,
Oh.
no. I'll do it if no one else wants to do it, so. I don't have a
I'll
problem.
start, how's that? So maybe if it gets burdensome, maybe we can switch off.
Okay. Well, then, what if I make a motion to appoint managers, Schmalz to serve on the Lower St. Croix, one watershed, one plan policy committee on behalf of the CLFLWD.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the metro area water-based funding. I think it's just an authorization. Mike, you want to?
Yes, Madam President, managers, so we've had several meetings on this metro area watershed-based funding. I was reviewing some of my materials from last year and noticed that previously they were calling it performance-based watershed funding. So, and it's now simply watershed-based funding. So, that being said, then there was an allocation through the Clean Water Fund by the Bowser Board at their December meeting. And then there was a process in which this was to be distributed through the 7 metro counties and execute. Each of those areas then had to go through a process of deciding how they were gonna, or what they're gonna do with the money. And one of the options was simply to return it to Bowser and then have everybody go through a competitive grant process. We held a meeting with the cities because they are eligible through the relationship that they have with water management organizations, the counties, and the WCD. There was a general consensus of that rather than going through a process that would mimic the competitive grant process at a local level, for the sake of time, given that we have to have something into Bowser prior to July 2nd, that they proceed with a equal distribution, which still though would require us to identify a project within the Washington County area for the use of these funds over the course of the next roughly 2.5 years, which would be a typical Clean Water Fund grant cycle. So one of the things is then that for each entity to make a recommendation to approve what the work group had put together for this equal distribution, which really amounts to then $78,760. There is the possibility that it would maybe increase if Ramsey Washington decided that they didn't want to participate, but outside of that, we would expect it to be that amount.
I'll make the motion to accept the recommendations from Washington County Work Group as presented to us, the following motion.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
I thought we weren't gonna do this. Thought we weren't gonna go with this area-based distribution of funds for simplicity's sake and all that, and
Well, I think you were probably at,
I missed.
I think you missed the meeting, but the discussion, we had the discussion that something is better than nothing, and we've already made the commitment to go with this concept. We're not gonna stop this train. It's a statewide push. The legislation was changed to allow Bowser to do this. And so whatever the portion is that we get, which we were told were about 6% of the land area, doesn't count Chisago, it's only Washington, to my understanding. And so that would amount to about, I think it was 30,000, maybe between 30 and 40,000. So that pays for a program. And so it's money that would have to be raised in a different way, and it's available. And it will be, and it will be consistent.
Will we be allowed to continue to compete for a competitive type grant? I mean, this doesn't preclude any of that.
No.
So I'm fine.
No.
Okay.
But there will be a subsequent agreement, and one of the stipulations, I continue to be the lone wolf communicating a desire for performance-based, right, kind of on a cost-benefit efficiency prioritization element. But one of the, I don't want to say concessions, but one of the things then that the group agreed to was that given the time frame, it was less than ideal what we came up with. However, then that we would put in language that we will seek on the next round to work on developing a performance-based program.
Okay. Good.
Yep.
All right.
Was there a second?
Yeah.
You did? Okay. John seconded. Any further comments, suggestions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is the metro area watershed-based funding. Oh, excuse me, we just did that. District awards program.
Madam President, managers, staff brought a framework for the district awards program to you at your February 22nd meeting. And at that meeting, you tasked us with soliciting some feedback on that framework from Angie Hong and Laura Jester, and also with coming up with an outreach plan of how we would spread the word about this program. And we did both of those things. The outreach plan is attached. Jessica put that together, and it's kind of a multifaceted approach that we take to spread awareness about this program. It would have a digital component, a printed component, and kind of a spoken component. And based on the feedback that we received, we have an updated framework for your consideration tonight. It's very similar to the one we brought in February 22nd. The main change is that the February 22nd framework, as you probably remember, had several different awards, different categories. For example, there was an agricultural award, a residential award, a business award, and a community award. And there was the additional overall legacy award and overall junior legacy award. And what we are recommending tonight is that we just have two awards, an overall legacy award and an overall junior legacy award for someone who's age 19 or younger. You can give out multiple awards if you want in a year, and you can still give them to each of those same, to an agricultural project or to a business project, but you don't necessarily have to commit to finding someone from each of those categories each year. So that's our recommendation, and we're just kind of looking for your input and eventually for your permission to move forward with this.
Well, I think, my comment is that you sent this out to Laura Jester and Angie and got two different answers from them. And so I think, I just want everybody to keep in mind that the overall program outline had some big goals as part of this. It's not just an award. It's got a purpose behind it, and the purpose behind it is to further public education and personal responsibility for keeping our public waters clean and healthy. That's the whole point of our VMP programs. And also to inform our stakeholders of district's activities, achievements, and future plans. Now, we haven't gotten to the point where we are sending out an annual newsletter, which is part of our plan. This is a way to do that. Newsletters are expensive. We talked about that at the CAC. It can cost several $1,000s just for the mailing. So this is a way to bring people together to hear this in a different vehicle. And so the awards are the hook, basically, to get people excited and interested in this, but also to really underscore the importance of individual personal responsibility in achieving these goals, because that's really where it comes from. And it was underlined at that seminar that you and I went to, Mike, about a month ago, is the folks from the agencies and DNR especially were underscoring how important it is to get people to understand their role in helping to achieve quality and to sustain it. I also think that it's very difficult to compare these different projects. And so it's very difficult to put an agricultural project against a commercial project or a residential project, but they're all important. And so I would hate to lose that kind of broad outreach that this program would achieve. And the one thing that I thought was probably a good thing to do was not do the Junior Watershed Award, because that Watershed Legacy Overall Award is to recognize an individual or an entity that has really done a superior job at helping the district achieve goals. And that's probably an individual or an entity over time. It's not one specific project, but their actions over time that have contributed to the success of water quality. So I would hate to lose that distinction by going down to just those overall awards. But that's my input. The other thing I thought too, there's no real hurry to get this done today, and Manager McNamara expressed an interest in this at our last meeting, and so I think this is an appropriate project that we want to have a board liaison working with staff, and I would think that that would be, since she's expressed an interest in this, I would think that would be a good way to accomplish refinement. So if we can agree to the overall structure of the program, or the concept, I mean, we can fine-tune the structure with the CAC committee and Manager McNamara's guidance. That would be my recommendation.
I like the idea of having Manager McNamara get involved, so that would be good. I also like the fact that we actually cut it down to two awards, or one award, whatever we finally decide, because I think while you can have suggested classes of ideas of what people can apply for the award, I think just having one or two while we're starting out is a good idea. Otherwise, it's having 5 or 6 awards, that's a lot of work, I think, and cumbersome to understand everything else. So I think starting out simple is a smart way to go.
Well, you can always add more later.
Later on, right. So, I mean, I think we could use those separate categories as ideas or suggestions of what people might look at or consider doing, so.
Well,
It looks good, so we're gonna.
yeah, so I think those are, those are two very diametrically opposed approaches to this. And so I think we need to tweak that. We don't have to decide that tonight. And let's have the next month or two, if that's what it takes. But let's have it resolved by the end of June. I'm going to make a motion then that we appoint Manager McNamara as the board liaison to fine-tune this program and to bring back a recommendation, a final recommendation at our June meeting, our second June meeting. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the Third Lake Pond project restoration and closeout.
Madam President, managers, the gift that keeps on giving, I guess. There are two action items within this discussion point here. So for the purposes of this evening, I want to cover just two pieces in here. First is the memo from EOR on the final closeout with our current contractor, such that we can make the final payment and move into what may be phase 2 and hopefully final restoration of the project site. So perhaps I'll let Engineer Grasky go over that memo first and do that. And the last item, again, will be reviewing two proposals for engineering, or for contracted services really by two different areas, prairie restoration and a local contract to do restoration work on both the city property as well as some private property in the adjacent area.
Madam President and managers, yeah, this can be very brief. Basically, we've received all the needed closeout items as listed in the memo. We did retain a portion of the retainage to go towards this, I guess, revised scope of restoration, kind of an enhanced restoration as kind of discussed and negotiated with the landowners. So our recommendation is to approve the final payment and closeout of the Third Lake Pond contract with Peterson Companies.
Just a quick question, how much of that was retained from Peterson toward the final?
5,000.
5,000? Okay, good. Thank you. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And now on the restoration work.
Madam President, managers, so there are two different firms then that I contacted last summer, August timeframe, and then into the fall, to assist with completing some work in the project area. The first, and maybe more simplistically, is the prairie restoration proposal for the native landscape part of the city property, in which there was an area mostly on the north side of the project where there was construction activity related to the project, in which there was restoration that needed to occur. Some of this land area was previously being mowed, and so it would be a little bit more of a challenge to get that fully restored. Both myself and the owner of Shoreline Landscaping went around and talked to property owners around the project site. And in particular, when it came to the native prairie area on the east side, where the one resident, or two of them, were actively mowing some of the city property, I talked to them about the value, and then discussed also about the possibility, and one in particular was very excited about some additional native flowers being put in that. So I did talk with the site manager, Jeff West from Prairie Restoration, and there's a line item for some additional wildflower seeds to be incorporated into the proposal. It's a couple $100, I think, here, or $405. But overall, then, that they would do the initial installation plus additional management to see it until its full establishment. So that one, as noted in my memo, I recommend in full to fund that portion of the project for restoration. The next portion, there are three quotes for different work from Shoreline Landscaping. And these are all on private property in the project area. The Shannon Peterson property is north of the project, and that was used by the contractor for access into that main area, and then they traversed along the north side on some private property, and then into the city property to come along farther to the east. So a fair amount of the restoration had occurred. There were some still outlying things that needed to happen there to improve it. Some of the board members were down there. You observed it as well. And so it really became a point where it seemed that no matter what Peterson companies did, the landowners were not, I mean, we know that they were chased off site, and there was a lot of complaints, both to us and to the city about the work or the performance. And, I mean, I will add, though, that from our perspective, the contractor did what we asked them to. The project is a success. We've completed the excavation. We've documented the improvements from the water quality, and both from the project, and then many of the residents also communicated that there was much improved water quality in that area of the lake this last summer. So from that standpoint, we really, we felt that the contractor was doing what they were asked of. But on the restoration side, so for the Peterson property to the north, it was really, we were really spending a lot of time out there. So this restoration proposal is a proposal that would, in fact, do more than what maybe we would normally have expected to be completed at any site, given the area. But but it's very clear that the owner is happy with this company, and this would in fact close it out. On the other site area, there is a drainage easement that the city had, and then we also then entered into an easement agreement for the same area. It was all tree lined and quite eroded. The city requested that we do some restoration in there on that particular area. We did it. And the landowner has continually insisted upon additional restoration. There is some issues with that sort of gully stream bed stabilization, in which it could be improved. Whether the 37, 35 represents the amount that actually needs to occur, but I would recommend that amount to be incorporated. The last piece, just on the property itself, the district had already brought in some additional black dirt. A lot of the area that's now lawn was actually trees and such. And much of it also was just bare dirt and such. So while there's probably some portion of the edge of that drainage easement that we did work in that could use a little touch-up, it's not, in my opinion, worth $4,512.50. So my recommendation would be that we would approve the Shannon Peterson property proposal, this gully stream bed stabilization, and then some additional amount for maybe a little bit of extra grading and work for them to sort of walk their way out of the project site.
And that's covered by these two call-outs that you have in the memo, correct?
Correct.
So it's a total of $6,695 after the $5,000 set off from Peterson. The Peterson contract. So it totals $11,695. We've got $5,000 credit from Peterson's contract. So the total to the district would be new money, $6,695. Okay?
Yep.
All right. So that's the proposal. I'll make a motion that we approve the staff recommendation and close out the EOR project.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion?
So we've also got the prairie restorations cost, right, $6,255. That's part of this one motion, it's both
Oh, that's right.
for
I'm
prairie
sorry.
restoration
You're right.
and
We're gonna have to-
shoreline
Yeah, you're right.
landscaping, so,
Oh, I did have that up in the motion.
yeah,
Yeah, let me alter the motion. I've got it in two spots here. Manager Anderson moves to approve district administrator enter into agreements upon review of legal counsel with Prairie Restoration for the amount not to exceed $6,255, and Shoreline Landscaping for the amount not to exceed $6,695. And that's after application of the $5,000 credit from the Peterson contract.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. And next item is the report of staff.
Madam President, managers, I'll just have to work through those numbers a little again.
I'll give you my copy.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there's really anything else to add for this month with respect to what's in the administrator's report. We did have the auditors on site today, and it's my understanding there are no findings.
I just have a couple of questions on some of these things. I can talk to you about these after the meeting, Mike.
Okay.
We don't have to take time tonight. There's nothing that I think is of a public nature here. Oh, the Moody, maybe the only thing under 3005, you mentioned the publication from, I think that's probably from Angie. What about the Moody Lake article? Did that get published?
It's been sent out, it has not been published yet.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, next is EOR. Any further updates?
Nothing further, Madam President.
Okay, Smith Partners? Thank you. Report of treasurer.
Okay, we have, for the month income was $5,673.11. Our expenses were $84,213.73. So I'd like to request approval for the board to pay these February expenses of $84,213.73.
I make a motion to approve the treasurer's report, pay the bills.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Next item, report of officers and managers.
Nothing for me.
Manager Mo, Manager Spence, Manager Schmaltz.
Nothing.
Nothing from me, okay. The next, I should ask, we have a visitor. Is there anything to address the board?
No, I asked Mr. Lambert is here. but-
Mr. Lambert, okay.
Yes.
I thought that was you. I only met you with one time, so. Is there anything that you would like to address to the board? All right, thank you. All right, the next meeting is April 19th. When do we start our 2 meetings per month? So that in May? So that we don't have such a long agenda during our busy period? Usually have 2 meetings a month during the busy season, so we don't have these marathon meetings.
It's in the meeting minutes somewhere.
Yeah, it is. Anyway, so that's to be addressed. But the next regular meeting is April 19th, 2018, and there is no other business before the board.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.